Thank you.
Okay, I think to start with, call the meeting to order. Joint City Council Fire Protection District Board meeting, amended agenda for October 2nd, 2021. Have a flag to share for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Put your hand over your heart. Repeat after me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Sorry. Board member, council member Miriam Apadamos.
Here.
Board member, council member David Worrell.
Here.
Board member, council member Peter Washington.
Here.
Vice chair, Vice Mayor Mark Joseph.
Here.
Chair, Mayor Garcia. Leon Garcia.
Here, thank you. Report on closed session, report of any reportable action.
There, Mr. Rossum on.
Yeah, I do not see him. Maybe he has a difficulty logging in.
1 second.
Someone give him a call, please.
Just close it. Like a little.
Yeah, I think while we take care of Mr. Ross, we'll go on city clerk announcement pursuant to Government Code 54952.3. It is as stated in the agenda. I think we can pick up with Mr. Ross when he's available.
He is about to log in a few
Okay.
seconds.
Mr. Ross. Report on report on closed session confirmation of the reportable action.
Mr. Mayor, Council, there was both a fire district closed session and a City of American Canyon closed session. You convened in open session at 5:31 p.m. And then adjourned to closed session to address the matters agendized. You took the matter dealing with the City of American Canyon first, and that concluded at 6:09 p.m. You then addressed the balance of the closed session agenda for the Fire Protection District, concluding at 6:27 p.m. With respect to both the city closed session and the Fire District closed session, a written report upon return from closed session will be prepared consistent with the provisions of Government Code Sections 54.957.1. That would conclude the report for this time, subject to the written report as described, unless there are questions.
Any questions from council? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Ross. Moving on to our agenda, proclamations and presentations. Proclamation recognizing February 2021 is Black History Month. We are very proud as a community in recognizing how important this is to members of our community for this recognition.
Excuse me, Mayor Garcia, is it okay if I read the announcements for those that are not sure on how to participate in the meeting?
Please go ahead.
Thank you for joining the February 2nd, 2021 City of American Canyon City Council meeting. This meeting is being held entirely virtually in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The format tonight will be similar to that of an in-person City Council meeting. In addition to the Zoom platform, the meeting is being broadcast on cable TV, Channel 28, and YouTube, and streamed live on the city's website. You will see the City Council members on your screen, along with members of city staff. All members of the public will participate in a listen-only mode. Public comments is invited for non-agenda items during the public forum section of the meeting and on each agenda item. When the item you wish to speak on is called, please follow these steps to make your comment. When the mayor calls a particular item and you wish to speak on that item, click the raise hand button if joining by computer. If joining by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. When it is your turn, I will announce your name and invite you to speak. You may see a message saying the host would like to unmute your microphone. If you get this message, click unmute myself and begin speaking. To unmute yourself by phone, dial *6 and begin speaking. Video will not be turned on, only the audio. You have up to 3 minutes to make your comments to the City Council. At the end of the 3 minutes, I will ask you to conclude your comments quickly, and I will mute your audio once you're done. Please only press *9 to raise your hand for the items you wish to speak on. as the raised hands will be cleared at the end of each item. The agenda for this meeting is available on the City Council's page of the city's website. As in the standard practice, community members are allowed to comment one time on each agenda item. All votes at tonight's meeting will be taken by roll call. We ask your patience and understanding when there are technical difficulties. This concludes my introductory remarks.
Thank you for the introductory remarks. So we said where we are. We're at proclamations and presentations. We take great pride this evening in recognizing February 2021 is Black History Month, and certainly we know the importance it is to members of our community as well, and to all of us. City of American Canyon Proclamation, recognizing February 2021 is Black History Month. Whereas, in 1950, Dr. Carter Goodwin Woodson, noted Black scholar and son of former slaves, founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which was later renamed the Association for Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, and whereas Dr. Woodson initiated Black History Week, February 12, 1926, for many years, the second week in February, chosen so as to coincide with the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln, was celebrated by African Americans in the United States. And whereas in 1976, as part of the nation's bicentennial, Black History Week was expanded and became established as Black History Month, and is now celebrated all over the world. Now, as we pay tribute to the heroes, sung and unsung, of African American history, recalling the inner strength that sustained millions in bondage, we remember the courage that led activists to defy lynch mobs and register their neighbors to vote. We carry forward the unyielding hope that guided a movement as it bent the arc for the moral universe toward justice. Even while we seek to dull the scars of slavery and legalize discrimination, we hold fast to the values gained through centuries of trial and suffering. Whereas every American can draw strength from the story of hard-won progress, which not only defines the African American experience, but also lies at the heart of our nation as a whole. This story affirms that freedom is a gift from God, but it must be secured by His people here on earth. It inspires a new generation of leaders, and it teaches all of us that when we come together in common purpose, we can right the wrongs of history and make our world anew. And whereas the Black History Month reminds us to continue to fight for justice and equality, and should be a uniting call to our nation to continue to work for a more diverse, supportive, inclusive, and protective union. And now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Leon Garcia, Mayor, City of American Canyon, on behalf of the American Canyon City Council, do hereby proclaim February 2021 as Black History Month, and call upon public officials, educators, librarians, and encourage residents of the American Canyon community to observe this month with the appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Next would be a proclamation recognizing the life-saving actions of maintenance worker Steve Jarvie. This is quite a moment that happened in our community, and a quick response by one of our own staff saved life. It really did. I think many of us have seen that report in the press and following it locally. City of American Canyon proclamation recognized the life-saving action of Steve Jarvie. And I don't know if he's here this evening to join us with this, but
Mr. Mayor, he's in the attendees part of the Zoom. I don't know if he can be.
I do too.
Over.
Let me do it, Teresa.
And Mr. Mayor, we also had Brenda Knight was going to say some remarks on the last proclamation as well.
Okay. Well, let's hear from, there's Steve Jarvie. Okay, we have Chief here now. Let me miss that comment later from Brenda Knight. Steve Jarvie, thank you. Good to have you here this evening, recognizing your fast action you took. Recognizing the life-saving actions of Steve Jarvie, whereas Steve Jarvie, a 15-year veteran maintenance worker of the City of American Canyon, and was on Thursday, January 21st, 2021. Steve was at the right place at the right time. Sorry? of American Canyon, Arco gas station. And whereas at approximately 12:30 p.m., a young mother with two child seat age children, in the vehicle pulled into the gas station to fuel. And whereas while the mother was fueling the vehicle, one of the toddlers was able to unbuckle the seat and sneak out of the vehicle into height. Whereas after refueling, the mother drove a short distance away before realizing one of the children was no longer in the vehicle, and fearing for the child's safety, quickly returned to the gas station. And whereas during this time of day, northbound and southbound traffic on Broadway flows freely in both directions, and pedestrians, especially taller, would be seriously injured or killed if they walked into the roadway in front of traffic. And whereas during the course of his job duties, Steve was in the area and noticed a young child walking away from the gas station toward the roadway. And whereas thinking and acting quickly, Steve pulled his work truck into the gas station, sprinted toward the child who was running toward the roadway. And whereas Steve was able to grab the child before they could enter the roadway, and in doing so, he prevented what could have been a tragic accident. Now, therefore, be resolved that I, Leon Garcia, and the City Council of American Canyon do hereby recognize and thank maintenance worker Steve Jarvie for his alertness and action to prevent what could have been a tragic accident for this family and this community. Steve, thank you. We cannot thank you enough.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all. Thank God the girl was caught.
Yeah, thank you for your quick action. Well, that's a heart stopper.
It was.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it, Steve? Like, how did you see the kid? What, like, I saw the video. I don't know if I would have seen a kid while I was getting gas. That was amazing.
Yeah, I was pulling up to the red light, and I just glanced over towards the gas station, and I seen the toddler out there and no other vehicles in the station at all. And I actually backed up because I lost track of her, and then she started walking towards the highway, and that's when I pulled in and got out, and she kind of picked up her speed towards the highway a little bit, and luckily my own knees were able to run her down and stop her, and she was crying for her mother. She was really upset.
That was amazing. Great work.
Glad I was there.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Traumatic moment for the family, but those are stories that will be told over and over, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I would have to say, Steve, that you were a blessing to the community as well. My heart goes out to you. I think God put you in the right place. So I just want to thank you personally. I think that's you're a hero in my book.
Thank you, Mr. Washington.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I also, the sheriff wanted to thank Steve, and I dropped off a coin from the sheriff, and I just want to read what the back of the coin says, a challenge coin, because I think it's really fitting for Steve tonight. And the back of the challenge coin from our Sheriff John Robertson reads, "We all have the capacity to be a superhero. In order to become one, you just have to find your unique power and ability to exploit it for the greater good. The cape and the mask are optional, but the kind heart is essential." Author Robert Clancy.
Wow. Very good.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know how to move on to an agenda after that. I just think there's a moment for celebration there. And from our hearts, thank you. We got a comment on, we can move on to public comment now?
I was gonna bring Brenda Knight in to speak
Yes.
on the proclamation.
That's okay.
Okay. Hi, Brenda, please unmute your microphone.
Okay,
Good evening, Brenda. Welcome.
good evening. And I'm so thrilled that American Canyon City Council, hello Mayor and the council members, have continued during the pandemic to recognize Black History Month. And I'm so honored to be here to accept the proclamation, because during this time we have still so many things that we're thriving with. and we're having a wonderful, wonderful time celebrating all the good that is going on. Although there is so much that is still happening, we are still making strides and thriving. And so with everything that has happened, this is a great year for us. We've had so many to be elected. We've had so many to hold Congress seats and mayors, and it's just a wonderful time. I quickly would like to tell you about a story. I took several ladies to Alabama, and we had an opportunity to meet history makers who were part of the Bloody Sunday, walking on the Pettus Bridge. And after hearing their story, it was as though I knew I had to continue to do what I do as far as providing history, not only to students, but to adults. So we continue to celebrate in American Canyon after the pandemic is over. I definitely want to make it a point to make sure we have activities to continue to educate those that are in our community, because we have a community that is so well diverse. And so I look forward to doing what I can to make sure that the history of Black Americans are continued to be told, and that we start more conversations. So Mayor and City Council, thank you so much for recognizing our Black History Month, and I salute you for caring about your community. Thank you.
Hey Brenda, this is Miriam. I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you do. You said to us that you thank the council for doing this even during a pandemic. It is more important now than ever to continue to celebrate Black History Month and all of the different cultures in the city of American Canyon. It's what makes us who we are. So thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for always educating us. I feel like I learn something new from you every single time I talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Brenda, I will have to piggyback off of Miriam, Councilman Albadamos, by saying that, you're a staple of our community. And I've learned a lot personally from you. And I just want to thank you for your continuous involvement, bringing the women from last year when we had the Black History Month was an awesome education for all the people that came out for that as well. So I just want to thank you for being one of our leaders, and one that is respected highly by a lot of us.
Thank you.
Brenda Leon, just thanking you also for your community involvement all these years. I mean, the Ladies of Red event you do is signature piece. Great organizing that you do on that behalf, and certainly shares a knowledge and spirit of community that we all appreciate and value. To other comments as well, diversity is the treasure of American Canyon, and the fact that everyone is valued here as well and appreciated, and that bonding is what makes us strong, even in difficult times that we're facing right now. So I think the path going forward is something I know you pass along to the youth of our city as well, because they're the leaders of tomorrow.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, council, shall we, public comment is open? Any other public comment?
Hi, Mayor. We do have one hand raised, but for the record, I would like to mention that we received public comments from Brenda Quirk. She had a non-agenda item regarding homelessness and trash issues in American Canyon. We received one from Chris James on D12 regarding the community garden, and D3 fuel station. Jason Kishnoff, he provided a public comment regarding D3 related to the fuel station, and a non-agenda item on cannabis ordinance, indoor versus outdoor. From Kirk Craze, item D2 regarding the community garden. And from Tammy Wong, community garden and traffic calming, and also mentioned a request to look out for skeeters in American Canyon. And we currently have two hands raised, one from Justin Hamilton Hall and Janelle Selig. And I will promote Justin to the panel. Hi, Justin. Please unmute your microphone.
Okay, I am here.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a quick question to, my question is, when we can, have a new house? I know that the hill is still there, because there's nobody working on a new house, like 3-4 house. There a way, give me feedback, when we get a new house? What's just Karen Moore?
I'm not understanding your question, Justin, sorry.
I think it relates to that 4-unit subdivision off of Rio Del Mar and West Carolina. What the status is.
Yeah. I don't really know the status on that.
Yeah, I don't have a status on that, Mayor, but I'm guessing between now and management comments at the end of the meeting, Community Development, Brent Cooper might be able to put some thoughts together. So we might cover that at the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So now, is there another speaker?
Yes, we have Janelle Selick. Hi, Janelle.
Oh, I don't know.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I just wanted to jump on for a moment and take just a couple minutes and share a little bit about the Heart Your Parks campaign that we just launched last weekend. And this campaign runs through the whole month of February, and it's really designed to complement the city's We Heart Everyone campaign. This one in particular is focused on all of our parks and open spaces, and probably the most visible part has been the public art hearts that have popped up over the weekend. And so you'll see a nice display at Shenandoah Park as well as Community Park 2, and then several of the frames, about 5 or 6 of them at other parks throughout the community and our trailheads. So I just want to thank all of the artists that participated. We have over 29 artists, ages 7 to 75 plus, that took a plywood heart and created something really beautiful out of it. All of the hearts are different and unique, each an expression of the artist, and a lot of them have really interesting stories to tell. So please take a moment and check out our website at acparks.org. There's a map on there that showcases all of the different areas that the hearts are located, as well as information about the other parts of that campaign, which include other nature art activities, a Heart and Souls program, a search and solve activity that the city, Creighton City staff has put on. So it should just be a really fun month. And in fact, I just got back from a walk with my daughter at Wetlands, and we found some of the little hidden art pieces that were just put out as well. So take some time and get out and explore our parks this weekend, and or throughout the whole month, really, and have a great time doing it.
Well, thank you for doing that. And thank you to all the artists in the Community Parks Foundation, city staff. I've driven by, and it's just, people stop by and have a selfie or a picture taken, and it's right there at American Canyon there. It's just very new and very creative, and thank you. It's just, coming out of this stay-at-home order is, we need something to break that's a bit, and you certainly have accomplished that with that project. Thank you.
It really is a great reason to get outside and take lots of selfies.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers?
If anyone else wishes to speak during public comment, please press *9. No other public comment.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then. Our agenda changes, council. Anything for agenda changes? Okay. No matters coming forward here in open session on American Canyon Fire Protection District Board. Business of American Canyon Fire Protection adopted a resolution authorizing exercise of an option to purchase and execute an agreement for the purchase of real property between district and A.W. Pottery, U.S. Incorporated, for a future North Fire Station located at 659 Napa Junction Road.
Chairman Garcia and board, I'll try to be reasonably quick in this presentation. Back in May of 2019, the board actually, in the previous fire administration, initiated action towards the purchase of this property. but it actually goes back into October of 2008 when there was actually a discussion about the future of the fire district from long-range master planning, looking at staffing, succession planning, and also facilities. And it was that time the need for a potential need for a northern a fire station in the northern location of the city as it is developing was brought to the attention of the board, and the board discussed that with the previous fire administration and came to the realization that the fire district needed to start looking at something along those lines. There was a number of things that came out of that, but the most important one was that property, frankly, in American Canyon is becoming more and more limited. And certainly pieces of property that are consistent with the needs of a fire station location. The movement towards the Watson Ranch properties, the Broadway District development, and Napa Logistics Parks all pointed towards something in the northern part of the fire district area. This property at 659 North Napa Junction Road is the property that Chief Weeks was able to find and also enter into an agreement with the property owner through a realtor to move towards the purchase. It is essentially a 1 acre parcel. It's undeveloped. We've been in contract with the owner in a lease purchase type agreement for the last several months. The negotiated price was $595,000. We have been making some lease payments on that, and at this point, we're ready to move forward with the purchase of it, and asking the board to authorize the execution of the lease option agreement and purchase agreement for the final purchase price of, well, the purchase price was, was $595, but we have a payment of $540,000 to actually initiate the final purchase of the property. And so we're asking the board to initiate that tonight.
Any questions of board directors? Okay. Any public comment on this matter?
There are no public comment.
Okay. We'll close public comment then, return to the board. Is there a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the purchase of the property?
I'll make the motion, and this is a good thing, I think, because it's we have land that's hard to get these days, and acquiring it for a fire station that will be needed much north. So I'm going to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-03, a resolution of the American Canyon Fire Protection District, a subsidiary special district of the City of American Canyon, authorizing the exercise of an option to purchase and execute an agreement for purchase of real property between the district and A.W. Pottery USA, Inc., for a future North Fire Station located at 659 Napa Junction Road.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion second, roll call, please.
Board Member Abadamos?
Yes.
Board Member Oro?
Yes.
Board Member Washington?
Yes.
Vice Chair Joseph?
Yes.
Chair Garcia?
Yes. Thank you, board. We'll move on now to matters relating to American Canyon City Council consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Motion second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Miriam Abadamos?
Yes.
Councilmember David Oro?
Yes.
Councilmember Pierre Washington?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mark Joseph?
Yes.
Mayor Leon Garcia?
Yes. Thank you, council. Moving on our agenda, public hearings. There are no public hearings this evening. Business, item D1, adopt a resolution ratifying and continuing the proclamation of existence of a local emergency, P20-001, issued by the Director of Emergency Services.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The pandemic that began in December of 2019 continues in Napa County and American Canyon and across California and the United States. Although the trends of late have trended more positive as it relates to infection rates and fatalities and so forth, there is still the need for the continuing local emergency here. We still have many of our safety protocols are in place. Many of our public facilities are closed, and our essential workers continue to work in difficult conditions and continue to deliver the services to the community that is needed. There is optimism on the horizon as it relates to the vaccine, and County Health Officer Dr. Karen Relucio presented an update to the County Board of Supervisors today, talking about the rollout and distribution of vaccine and some of the challenges really related to the lack of supply of vaccine available. Nonetheless, a strong effort is being made in Napa County to distribute whatever is made available to it, and they're not holding back. But nonetheless, there is still the need for the emergency declaration because of the protocols that have to be in place until we get to the end of this. So I don't have any other comments other than to say the conditions of local emergency still exist, and request that we continue to ratify this local emergency.
Okay. Comment from council? No? Any public comment on this matter?
There are no public comments.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2021, next in order, a resolution of the City Council of the City of American Canyon ratifying and continuing the proclamation of existence of a local emergency issued by the Director of Emergency Services.
I'll second.
Motion second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Alvaramos,
Yes.
Councilmember Oro,
Yes.
Councilmember Washington,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Joseph,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, council. Moving on to our agenda, we'll take up now. Receive information providing direction related to fees, usage, and multiple plots and usage by non-residents of the community gardens.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I am Creighton Wright, Parks and Recreation Director for the city. And give me 1 second, I'm looking for my PowerPoint. I have for you tonight a PowerPoint that'll walk through parts that are included in the staff report.
Excuse me for interrupting here. I should, by disclosure, and let everyone know that I do run a garden plot over there in the community garden, have for many years. Mr. Ross, any reason why I cannot participate?
No, the issue before the council tonight is one that would affect residents equally, so there is no reason.
Oh, thank you. Just want clarification on that. Okay, Mr. Wright, please continue.
Yes, so as a part of my presentation, I'll give a bit of background and history about the community garden, then go into 3 issues that we'll be providing you an update on tonight, and asking for your direction on that. I expect we'll take your direction and put it into a more formal fashion and likely bring it back to council for formal approval at some point in the future. So first, background, the community garden is managed by the Parks and Recreation Department, and the notion of community gardens in and managed by the city is something that is becoming less and less common. It was very big in the kind of 80s into the 90s, and then has started to lose some of its focus and emphasis in the last decade or so. Our community garden provides health and recreation benefits to the residents that have a garden plot there. I'll go into a little bit more details about what exactly is included in that plot. We have gardeners from American Canyon, Vallejo, and Napa. Majority of our gardeners are from American Canyon. We have just 2 handfuls or so of folks that don't live in the community that have a plot there. And most of our gardeners have 1 community garden space. There are a few likewise that have multiples. And that happens to be one of the topics we're talking about tonight. So the history, the garden originally catered to residents of what was at the time American Canyon and Vallejo. This was before the city incorporated, and it was located along the highway. In 1986, it was moved to the area that it is today in generally Elliott Park under the power, PG&E power lines in the kind of open space. There were 72 garden spaces initially when it was installed in 1986. And in 2013, we went back as a city and added 30 more spaces. So there are a total of 102 spaces in the garden. Gardeners are currently assessed a rental fee of $15 a year and a $5 deposit when they begin their time as a gardener. The community garden spaces are 15 feet by 20 feet, 300 square feet in total. The city maintenance provides some basic weed control in the main aisles and around the outside of the garden. This item is being brought before you here tonight because we're right before we start our annual renewal of our reservations for garden spaces. That generally happens in February or March. And then those rentals occur for a year, beginning in generally mid-February, early March. We do have a community garden handbook, which serves to guide effectively rules for those that have a space in the garden. It is attached to the staff report for your review and consideration. It is updated on occasionally based on concerns that are raised from the gardeners. So now, moving into our first issue that I will share with you is gardeners who have multiple plots. Again, going back in history when the garden very first was created, with residents of both Vallejo and American Canyon, there were some residents that had multiple plots in that garden. When they moved over to the Elliott Park site, that continued. We're currently in a position where we have several folks that have multiple plots. Some as many as 4. We have one gardener with 4, a few with 3, and then 10 or 11 with 2 plots. This is a bit of a challenge for us because the rules in the handbook identify that each household should have 1 plot. That was a rule since before my time, but the view was since we've been managing it that those folks would be grandfathered and allowed to remain. So the question that is before you here tonight is, should that policy effectively of allowing those with multiple plots continue? There's currently 15 on the waiting list, and we have roughly 15 with multiple plots. This item was brought to PCS. Actually, all of these items were brought to PCS. Staff originally made a recommendation to PCS that we should limit all those with multiple plots down to 1. Staff did offer an option in the staff report that took a bit of a gradual reduction in garden spaces over the next 2 years. And that recommendation, which PCS agreed with or favors, was reducing those with 3 and 4 plots down to 2, and those who currently have 2 to keep those 2 for this year, and then reduce everyone, all of them, down to 1 the next year. So the challenge here is that, again, we have some folks with several plots and some of our residents that are eager to have new plots. And so the question is, do we keep the policy as is, or do we change it? Now, Mayor, I might pause here for just a moment and ask if you'd like to take these issues one at a time or go through the presentation in total.
I think maybe you have more to present on this going forward.
Yeah, I'll go
back and take up the issues. I think maybe it helps to have the whole picture painted and come back and highlight it.
Sure. Very good. So the second issue bringing before you here tonight for an update and your direction is on non-resident access and fees. We currently do, as I mentioned, going back in time from when the garden originally was created and carried over into the Elliott Park site, have 11 spaces that are being currently held by non-residents. Again, we have a waiting list of residents who are eager and interested in having a space. If we were to look at this from a consistency perspective on our other recreation, our high demand recreation programs elsewhere, say aquatics as an example, we give residents a priority to register for our aquatics programs, and then if we have non-residents in our programs, we also charge them an extra fee. So from a consistency perspective, community garden is treated a bit differently in that we don't have a priority right now for non-residents to get slots, and there isn't a higher fee for non-residents either. So in talking about this with the Parks and Community Services Commission, the question was asked about whether or not we should remove any of those non-residents that are currently there, effectively not allow them to renew. PCS did not favor that, and neither does staff, for what it's worth. We feel like the folks that are there should be able to remain as long as they're interested and can follow the rules. PCS did recommend a resident priority, so each year we pick people up off of the waiting list. We would kind of shake it up and resort it so that the residents come out first and non-residents would be towards the end of the line. That was our concept that we're working off of right now, and that was generally the recommendation of PCS. And finally, PCS recommends that we implement a non-resident fee as we do with all the rest of our recreation programs. So that is the point of direction for council. Should we prioritize residents to have a plot first, and should we implement a fee? I suppose even the question of residents in the garden allow for renewals is a question as well. So final issue before you here tonight, Mr. Mayor and council members, is that of our garden reservation fees. Again, as I mentioned in the overview, the fees for the community garden have been and are $15, have been $15 from as long as we can find history on what the original fee was. It generates approximately $1,500 a year. Again, there's 100 plots, $15, $1,500. It costs the city approximately $10,000 a year to maintain and manage the community garden space. The single greatest expense is water. There is a dedicated water meter for the garden, in which the water meter report for the last year was included in the staff report as well. So any difference between the cost and the revenue is subsidized by the general fund. So in PCS listening to this, or actually, let me take a step back, the staff recommended that we increase the fee to $100, and PCS listening to some public comment and their own consideration favored a more measured approach in the implementation of an increase in fee, starting with $50, going up to $75 the next year, and $100 the following year, taking effectively a 3-year stance on increasing the fee. PCS also recommended that we include an automatic increase on an annual basis to make sure that the costs of providing the service are covered. As I mentioned, we did receive public comment on this topic at PCS, and we have public comment here tonight, and I would expect that we'll probably have some folks that will want to speak on this issue tonight and provide their feedback. The What we've heard is that the gardeners are really critical of the ultimate fee of $100, getting up to that point. That is the greatest concern. Some of the gardeners have proposed some cost-saving measures, namely water conservation efforts, and we think that's a good idea, and we'd like to spend this next year working with the gardeners to come up with some ideas for water-saving measures. There was some early water-saving attempts when I first started here that have since then gone by the wayside. And finally, there was some question by some of the gardeners about some of the costs and comparisons that we were providing in the PTS staff report, which have been included to a lesser degree in tonight's staff report. When we did some comparisons, mainly concerned about the fee that we're proposing at $100 when you go out and you look at community gardens in the surrounding area, albeit not that many of them exist, but the few that are, the price, the annual fee is generally around $60 on average. And that is for the most case, a 10 by 10 or 100 square foot plot. As I mentioned earlier in this presentation, our plot sizes here are roughly 300 square feet, so that's 3 times that size. And our fee of $100, when you kind of break it down on a per square foot basis, our fees that we're suggesting at $100 breaks down to 33 cents a square foot, where the next nearest fee comes down to 66 cents a square foot. It's double our fee if it was on a direct proportional apples to oranges comparison from comparing the plots. And then there are others that are higher than that, even more so. So, Mayor, that's the brief overview and presentation I have for you tonight with the 3 issues. I can gladly take any questions before you ask for public comment and then ultimately provide some direction.
Very good. I'd like to weigh in on as to gardens out there. Just paint a picture of community around us. It's quite a place in American Canyon. There's a community bonding as we relate to what we grow out there, often helping or partnering with somebody who has a plot next door or somewhere else in the garden. It reflects a lot of it, the diversity of American Canyon as well. I mean, there's vegetable products there that you can't get in the store that people grow. Right now, Babas is very popular with the Hispanic, Latinx, Mexican community. It's fava bean. You can't get those in the market. Any variety of heirloom tomatoes is grown during the summer. Parda is a very popular, it's like a bean pod that's very popular with the Ilocano community in the Philippines. So you see the variety of flavors of across the American Canyon ethnic makeup in American Canyon in that garden. There is a sense of community out there. One person whose name I didn't hear mentioned in terms of letters was sent to me in the council on January 21st was Sam Quiros. Sam Quiros is the champion good neighbor. He's got the rototiller machine, and anybody who needs their plot rototill to start planting, he's out there helping out. He takes care of a lot of somebody needs it water while they're on vacation, he'll take care of that, weed control, things like that. So it's a sense of we help each other out a lot out there. That brings me to, it's a great opportunity here for a volunteer group to go in. I mean, I've gone in and mowed weeds now in the past, mostly to get to my plot or other people's plots out there. With a group from a church, we sheet composted the trail next to the park to get rid of the goat heads all the way out to Northampton. Seems to be successful. I haven't seen goat heads. There's some weeds breaking through. But here's an opportunity to rally the volunteers in town to take care of the maintenance of it. It's a good weekend's work, and probably a picnic lunch associated with it would certainly help out the morale of that. I'd point out that, there's a lot of empty plots out there too. I noticed that. Several I've noticed for quite a few years. I think I've had a spot there for maybe 8 years, maybe more. And some have remained vacant all this time. Some are overgrown with Bermuda grass, which is really hard to get rid of. I would suggest that that be looked into in terms of there's a time limit if it's not being used. That, say, okay, then open it up to some other person who would have more interest in doing it. I heard the story from Long Term there from some of the folks that had it. Some were no longer had plots. They they moved on or passed away. They were quite elderly at the time. The soil out there is not very good. And many of them have worked for years to condition the soil to be able to grow what they have. So that would be something to take into consideration as well. So there's a lot of dedicated gardeners out there, myself included. I think I think that's where I am for right now. I just think that there's community benefit to this. Think about it. Particularly, I think now, given all the COVID restrictions, you can be outside the garden and you're outside, fresh air. You have the social distance ability to communicate with other people, and you can produce something for your table at home. So I think as we look at public benefit, I think probably a comparative with, say, the pool or the parks we have, and the community garden also has a benefit related to it as well. And I think probably I have some comments as we get through the issues, particularly the fee for rental and water uses and stuff like that. I think anybody else that wants to comment before we go through, I'd like to go through the items one at a time, have a discussion. So,
I'd like to comment, Mr. Mayor, before we Craig, can you go to the last slide, please, so we can get a summary of all the issues? So there's multiple plots for household, and this is what we are going to be tackling this evening. And the mayor shared the community benefits. I don't think anybody on the council here is questioning that. I think community gardens are great. I don't use it personally myself, but I love to see that, there's people in the community growing their own food, and the city is providing a resource to do that. Absolutely valuable to the community, absolutely valuable to placemaking and neighborhood goodness, I think, overall. So in no way, in shape, form would I argue in that. I think the issue tonight is, the three that we see on screen. My initial, and I have some general comments, and I would love to hear whatever all the other council members have to say, as well as hear from the public, and I'll share those in a second. But my initial comment is for Director Wright. Why did this come up to council, and why couldn't this be handled at the PCS level?
Councilmember Oro, this is the topic specifically of fees is something that hasn't ever been ratified for the garden, so at some point we'll have to formalize it. And it as PCS being the advisory body can't provide specific kind of end-all be-all direction. So regarding those other two items, it ultimately is at council's discretion to determine how we make changes here, especially when it has the potential of impacting residents and a benefit that they're currently receiving.
Okay, I'm going to chime in here a little bit too. Councilmember Oro, this is being brought kind of in my direction as I began to learn more of the history of the community garden and understand that we were charging folks a fee that had never been to council for approval. It's something that needed to be brought to get that council approval. So that's why we're bringing it here primarily.
Great, thank you. So, just based on the staff report and the presentation now and some of the comments that I saw, here are I'm just going to share my general comments, throw them out there. Looking forward to hearing the rest of the discussion. Generally, I'm fine with all the new policies, but I think whatever we input, we should try to grandfather those things in with the current plot owners. We may need to be a little bit more aggressive in grandfathering with some things, but I think that could be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But I think, based on what I'm reading from the report and from what I'm hearing from others, and even the mayor himself said, hey, there's just reservations but not use, right? And I don't even know if we've even scrubbed that list in a long time to reach out to those people, either to collect a fee or make sure that they're using it, or even put some sort of parameters around them to make sure that their growing season is not gone to waste. I agree that American Canyon residents should have absolute priority on this whole thing, and we should include that in the guidelines or the guidebook of what we're doing. I'm okay with the fee structure that PCS recommended. I think that's another way to grandfather things in and slowly raise those fees so that we can recover our costs. I know that $100 may sound like a lot to some folks, but also, for us, I would just love for the city to cover its fees on at least the water part. Nobody's going to be making a profit off of this. And then, let's see, just another idea that I had, if there is room in the future for non-American Canyon residents to participate, I'm not sure they should be able to get a second plot. And, American Canyon residents, if we had to give them more than one plot, maybe non-residents can only get one plot ever and maybe two max. I don't know what the number will be. But, for me, I think another idea would be just to one plot if there's room for non-American Canyon residents. Speaking of American Canyon residents, I'm thinking 2 is probably it. I don't know. So those are my general thought processes. And I think there's another thing on the handbook obviously needs to be updated because, it's a little bit old because you have to submit an application form and come down to City Hall to do it. And obviously we're digital right now, so there should be an option to do this digitally versus another way. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor? Sorry, Vice Mayor Joseph was there.
Okay. I don't know if I'll be quick, but I'll try. I would agree that the community garden is an important asset, so we don't want to get rid of it. And actually, what I would like to suggest, in light of the fact that there is a waiting list, that we explore the option of a second garden somewhere. There's obviously some available land if you go to the west on the underground power lines. But if you also look at some areas over by Levine off of Flosden, there's some areas that I think you could generate kind of a long, skinny row of gardens. So, number one, I would encourage staff to explore the possibility of a second garden. And that solves a lot of problems because you would then be able to address the waiting list as well as some other issues. I agree 4 is too much. I'm probably 2 plots seem reasonable. I certainly like the idea of giving residents first shot at the reservation so that they get covered and non-residents get whatever's left over. And if we increase the number of plots, I think that isn't as much of a crisis. In terms of the fee structure, maybe because of my financial background, I tend to be a little more detailed, but a suggestion might be that we have a fee that is a fixed amount that covers your maintenance and administration, and then a variable fee that is the price of the water. So that, and that every year you would say, okay, all of you use $8,000 worth of water, that translates into so much a plot. If you conserve water and you only spend $6,000 the next year, then obviously your rate goes down. And that has the advantage of giving people some control over the price and gives us a great explanation to say, if you don't like the fee, you know how to deal with it. And then relative to the fixed amount, to say non-residents have to pay 100% of it, residents get some kind of a discount. That same concept of giving residents a break because they are contributing towards the subsidy, if you will, because they're paying local taxes. The last thing is, I agree with the mayor as far as taking advantage of our volunteers, but maybe going one step further, maybe encouraging some of the plot people to organize themselves into a small volunteer board that can deal with a lot of the day-to-day stuff. It does sound like, there's plots that aren't even being used. And at $15 a year, that's way too easy to write that check, even if you don't plan on doing anything. If it were $100, you might think twice and say, I'm not interested. So it just seems like there's a lot of internal stuff that we really don't want staff to spend a lot of time on, but somebody should. And the gardeners are the logical go-to group. The last thing is to put it in perspective. This has kind of been on autopilot from even before my time. And I appreciate the fact that it's being brought for some council direction, because it's, you know, I think the Parks and Community Services Commission hopefully would appreciate getting some insight from the council, because this has never been something that's ever had any dialogue. And so I appreciate the fact that it's being brought forward, that we can throw out some ideas, add it with the comments we're about to hear, and then give it back to the PCS to work out the details.
And if I just may add, I too, I didn't get to the point, but I agree with Vice Mayor Joseph that why not add more plots is a question I had.
Yeah.
You know, rather than different sites, thinking there might be some efficiencies at the current site, because there's a rototiller there and a good guy ready to do it for you. Then there's plenty of room there along that power line structure for plenty more plots, right? And I don't know what the cost, what it is to do that, but I'm okay with that as well. I mean, a huge community garden would be awesome.
Yeah.
Councilman Washington want to step in.
Yeah, the east side, just because there's geographically some flexibility is all.
Okay. Councilman Washington.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on this, and every time it seems like I find out more and more how much in alignment myself and Vice Mayor Joseph are, and it's impressing me. So, but this would be a perfect community group opportunity for those involved with the garden plots to take ownership and take this out of the hands of the city to manage, in my opinion. There's plenty of passionate people involved in this community garden, and I can tell from all the emails I've gotten today and all the public comments that I'm sure we're going to hear shortly. And I'm just curious, have we ever tried having a plot owners get together, form a committee, and organize themselves to develop some kind of community-spirited American Canyon Community Gardens Association, for instance? I would think that the city would be willing to assist with that. I don't want to speak for you, Mr. Holly, or you, Creighton, but this group could also develop and rewrite the handbook and take some ownership, develop the master lease agreement, and bring that up to the city for future consideration. But I think it takes and puts this back in what it is a community garden. Give it to the community to run, and then give it back to us. Just my thought.
Delta, your point is there's actually an informal handful of or more, depending on the how we get together out there, that takes care of it. I mean, like I say, Sam's got a rototiller. Other people will share equipment out there. When the weeds get high, I'm out there with my weed mower, and I see other users out there as well. So it's on an informal basis. I think probably a little more formality framed around it would be helpful. I do, like I said earlier, I think it's a great opportunity for a volunteer group to manage this area. Respect to the water, yeah, it's $15 a year is they're giving it away, and it's even during the drought, there's still water there. So I think that needs to be re-looked at. I think I was told years ago by some of the longtime residents out there who had like 4 plots, nobody really wanted the garden out here. There was like a lot of empty spaces, so they just allowed us to have as many as four of them we could have. But that certainly has changed. I think I don't know about the fee. That what concerns me. If we start raising it too high, then what kind of a burden does that place on people? Because you have what appears to be largely a lot of retired folks out there working on it. They've been here for a long time. Change is hard. I would suggest something like doubling the fee to $30 to initially start with, see what the sense of it is. I mean, the cost of the water concerns me. But on the other hand, we have a swimming pool, and we do fee recovery for events, but we don't charge people for the fact they're in this water that we're having to pay for as a city. And that's the public benefit side of it. I think $15 is too low for water, for the price of it. On the other hand, $100, I don't know how many people would walk away from it. And how many would say, I've been out here for years. I spent all this money conditioning the soil to grow my produce, and now I can't afford to do this. So I'd be very cautious about that piece. In terms of expanding it elsewhere, at the existing right-of-way under the power lines, there's still room out to Northampton. We did in the past look at the west side on the other side of Elliott. Apparently that's designated as a dog park. I know Mr. Wright explained to us the cost of building that because it's under the power lines. I think, was it somewhere in the area of 50,000? Mr. Wright, it's because of the power you have to have grounding electrodes into the ground because of what would happen in an accident, I suppose. We should look for other space in the community. That may be entirely possible as well. Any other thoughts from council members?
Yes, please. Can you put the slide back up so that I can comment, please?
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay, thank you. I'll start with issue number 1, people with multiple plots. When we first started, we were a much smaller community than we are today, so it makes sense that we made exceptions to the rule, right? But now that we have a wait list, I think we should enforce our rule and stick with 1 plot per household. And I also think that we need to do some kind of like inventory and check these plots out. If people are reserving plots for multiple years and not using them and we just have weeds growing, then we have an issue there, and we might want to have a conversation with those people and get some people in who have not had an opportunity to be part of the community garden. I also, in one of the public comments that we received via email, somebody mentioned subleasing of plots. So like somebody has a plot, but they never go to it and they send someone else. I'm not sure if there's actually a subleasing thing going on. If there is, then we should probably look into that. Or if it's just another member of a household who's going in and checking on the garden, which makes sense and is totally allowed under the rules. I would like some more information. Creighton, I believe you mentioned that cities are moving away from managing community gardens. I really like Councilmember Washington's idea of having some kind of gardeners association take control of it. But if cities are moving away from this, I want to know what they're doing and if this gardeners association type of deal is what they are doing. If it is, then maybe we should work out some kind of relationship, like similar to what we have with ACCPF, but an association that's managing, taking care of, and controlling, volunteering to take over the management of the community garden. I think that's an excellent idea. Non-residents, I believe we're all in agreement that American Canyon residents should definitely have priority. But I didn't hear anyone say, and I just want to be very clear, that should happen annually, right? So if somebody from the city of Napa has a plot in American Canyon because they came in off the wait list, or I'm assuming there's a closing period for when your fees are due by, and the way I envision this would be American Canyon residents have until that closing period, and then just like when you register for college, right, there's priority given to people with more units, a specific date for American Canyon residents to have their priority, and if they don't come in, then open it up to non-residents. But we need to redo that every year. So if a non-resident has a plot this year, the next year, when it's time for them to renew, we need to allow the American Canyon residents an opportunity first. I don't believe it's fair for an American Canyon resident to wait 4 or 5 years to get a plot in the American Canyon Community Garden when somebody from another city has been using it and enjoying it for several years. Regarding the water fees, when we changed our water fees for residents, we implemented subsidies for people on fixed incomes. So I would like staff to research something like that. Like if an American Canyon resident has a plot, I don't want them to lose it because of the fact that they can't afford this now $100, right? So I would like staff to investigate some sort of way to be able to subsidize people on fixed incomes. The mayor mentioned that many gardeners are retired. I don't believe it's fair to, I don't want to call it penalizing them because I completely understand the concept of us not eating those costs, right? We want to provide something to our residents, but we also want to be able to afford to continually provide this thing for our residents. So I would like for us to investigate how we can assist people who are on fixed incomes. And I agree. If we're able to do that, figure out a way to subsidize people who can't necessarily afford the $100, then I don't believe that we need a sliding scale. Otherwise, then I would agree to start with maybe like $50, $75, and increase it accordingly. Regarding a second location, I think that we should see how these new changes are going to affect what we currently have. I believe that if we're doing an inventory and not allowing people to just have weeds there, that's going to get rid of some people. By giving American Canyon residents priority, or only allowing residents to have one plot, that might turn some people off. Having to pay for water now might change some people's minds. So before we add a bunch of extra plots, I want to see how this how this plays out. I think it makes more sense to see if we continue to have a wait list before adding new plots that end up just being full of weeds later. And I think those are my only comments for now. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Let me add a thought to turn over a plot. I don't know how many of us on council do a lot of gardening. I mean, I grew up with it, so that's my passion. It takes a while to get the earth in a condition that is usable, that's optimal. So 1 year shot at it, it's not going to work. It can take 3-4 years, maybe even longer. This is a heavy clay soil, doesn't drain well. There's a lot of invasive weeds in it. I mentioned the Bermuda grass, which is really hard to get rid of. So gardeners out there, those who are avid gardeners, you can tell them by the activity going on. They've had those plots for years, and they've worked the soil and conditioned it to what they feel is optimal for what they want to grow. So a short turnover on that, it does not work. I feel that non-resident, I didn't notice that there was a whole lot of those there. I think probably as it turns over, then the person doesn't renew, then that is given to priority to local residents. I think several I know have larger plots. They're the ones who are the longest terms in there, I think. And to Councilman Oro's limitation of 2 plots, I think is acceptable in that respect. I think you got to get into the mind of a gardener, for people to grow plants. It takes a long time to get the soil conditioned to optimal use. And if it's going to be a short turnaround, then it's not going to be a whole lot of investment in that, because I'm spending all this money for soil amendments, and a lot of them have, or raised beds, and bringing in all the, there's quite a business going on with the compost facility out there on near the waste management building there on the Napa side. Get a truckload, I think, for about $7, and a lot of that's worked into the ground too. So I think you have to consider how it's used in terms of the decisions we make on putting it together. I think priority for American Canyon works. I think those who have a plot from outside the city respect that and have a turnover with them when they change. I think that's it for now for me. Anybody else?
Yeah, just
one question for you, Mr. Wright. Can you tell me when does the beginning of the cycle start, and when does the renewal cycle start for the plots?
Councilmember Washington, that's a great question. So we generally start our renewal process in the month of February, and we give our gardeners roughly a month to make a decision, and to back to Councilmember Avadamas saying that there was a cutoff. There is a cutoff. That's generally the end of the month of February, and then we turn around and then kind of give folks their green light starting March. So their year effectively is kind of from when they pay their fees after they get their renewal notice in February until they get their next renewal notice the next year. So generally February to February. Mr. Mayor, may I jump on and just talk to a couple of items that you guys, council has brought up here? So regarding, I'm sorry?
Can I just make one comment before that? So, because you might want to, one thing that I forgot to mention is we received a couple of public comments saying that there's dogs running around in there. I don't think dogs should be allowed in there. And I just agree with the public comment saying it's a food garden and I don't want someone else's dog doing their business on my tomatoes.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate just support for the sliding scale based on financial need that Councilmember Abadanos brought up. I think that's a good idea. And then there was one more thing that you said that I was going to agree with, but I lost my train of thought. So,
dogs are uncommon in the garden. It's fenced, and it may be an exceptional moment when somebody has a dog.
And I just wanted to reaffirm what the mayor is talking about. There is kind of an ownership, and that's where it gets to be a challenge that if you've invested a lot of time and resources into a plot only to have somebody take it the next year, that's going to cause a problem. And so however we implement it, I think giving non-resident or giving residents priority makes sense, but we also need to be able to, within reason, kind of allow you to reserve specific plot, number X or whatever. Again, those are two competing elements, but they're both important. I think it's important to give our locals a first shot at it, but we also need to give the individual the right to kind of maintain their spot over a longer haul, which is part of the reason why we may want to explore either expanding the number or at least thinning out some of those that appear to be inactive. And this might be a good time to at least solve some of the immediate crisis if we could just free up enough unused plots.
I may have an idea to reconcile that, Mark, Councilmember Joseph, or Vice Mayor Joseph. Eventually I'll get it right.
May I jump in just really quick in reconciling fallow plots?
Oh, we hear from Mr. Wright, please.
Sure.
Yeah, so we every year when we notice, so we do inspections once a month. One of our staff members, Miss Cherry Flathers, recently moved out of the city manager's office, has been amazing in managing the garden in the last couple of years. And what we did, this year's a bit of a unique circumstance due to the pandemic, but last year when we did our inspections, noticed the plots were fallow, she would reach out to those garden plot holders and as you all are saying, encourage them to get out there and start using their plots. If they don't, then they get some pretty significant pressure when it comes to renewal season. Last year we had 9 plots that turned over for folks that weren't using them, weren't gardening them, and turned over to new plot holders. For this year, though, we have taken a much softer stance on this due to the pandemic in that we want to be responsive to folks who don't feel comfortable in going out. And we do have some of our gardeners who have expressed that to us, that they're not comfortable being out in the garden. So we've been a little bit more lenient on the fallow plots this year than we have been in years past. So that's topic number 1. You guys have mentioned a sliding scale and the opportunity for folks who don't afford it. Our internal option to solve this is our scholarship program. We have scholarships available for all the rest of our recreation programs. It is not limited by age. There are many cities who have scholarship programs specifically to kids. We do not. We actually have some seniors that are on our scholarship program. So anyone of any age can go through our scholarship program. I think that's probably the easiest solution here. It does require that folks pay a nominal, roughly $10 fee, and if they qualify through one of 4 different mechanisms, then the rest of their fee is covered currently by the foundation as our greatest donor into that program. Subletting was brought up. We do hear from time to time about subletting. Or subleasing. It is very difficult for us. We're not investigators. We're not the FBI. When we hear it, we'll go and we'll talk to the owners, and it is very rare that we'll get someone who says, yeah, I'm subletting a plot. When we do, then we tell them they have to, and they have to move on. In most cases, what we're told is just as the mayor had mentioned, that it's a neighbor or a friend that's covering for while someone's out of town or whatever the case might be. The handbook needs updating. Councilmember Oro, you're absolutely correct. We did actually do our renewals last year virtually, and we have not updated the handbook to reference that. So that, as well as some of these points that we're here tonight, will need to be updated. And then the last item, a committee to oversee. In my first year here, we started down a road of talking about this as an option and realized that there are some very different perspectives in the garden about how and what people agree on relative to gardening practices, and it didn't seem like something that would make sense. In other words, there would be a lot of conflict associated with it. However, if that is a goal of council's, I know, as you have mentioned, there are some very dedicated and passionate folks out there that I'm sure would jump at the chance to sit down and talk more thoroughly about it. I think those are the few points I had just to bring up based on kind of comments and questions council had. And I'll just remind you, Mr. Mayor, that there are some folks that are interested in
So are we ready for public comment?
Can I just say one more thing, please, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say to Mark, when you and Mark actually, when you were talking about the non-residents and 1 year not being a good enough time to be able to garden and fix the soil. What if we were to cap the amount of plots that can go to non-residents? That way we don't increase that every year and push our residents out. And then that's it.
Just thought.
Idea.
Ready for public comment? Hearing no objection, public comment is open on this matter.
Yes. I'm bringing in Galaxy, it's no name, but it's Galaxy S10.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Who was the speaker?
Yes, Galaxy S10, but there was no name.
Okay.
So.
All right. Galaxy S10, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, my name is Jaime. I'm American Canyon City resident, and I just wanted to make a quick. I know I only have 3 minutes of time, but I was just wanting to. I've been a plot member for about 8 years now, and Mr. Mayor, I've seen you there from time to time, and you're an active participant. Go in there and kind of look around and participate in our activities. And I just want to re-emphasize that it takes a lot of work, backbreaking work, especially when I was on the waiting list. Thank goodness, not for more than about a year. But that 15 by 20 foot plot, to get it developed to where it is now, I had to break through that hard clay soil with all those pieces of asphalt in there and remove it. It took a long time to get that the soil to where I got it to mend the soil, to take the energy, the time and effort, and then to reap the rewards of able to get this produce, the reap the harvest and share it amongst my fellow gardeners, because some years I'll grow certain crops and then I'd exchange it within the community. And that's how you kind of build that huge bond. And that's such a significant thing that we have with one another, that commonality, the advice that we give one another, and that special bond that we share within the community. And I just think that getting to the point is, I like to ask, because when I saw these fees, the cost for $10,000 just to maintain the garden, that's like almost a 7-fold increase in the fees. And I know it's gradual, it'll be 50, 75, and 100, but that's almost a 7-fold increase. And basically we're at, the PCS is asking us to put the entire cost of the bill, 100%. And I just think that's kind of like unjust, and especially to the people who are on a fixed income. I'm not obviously a senior. I'm not on fixed by no means, but for the people that I've established a bond, that's going to hurt them. And I understand we're in the middle of a pandemic. With the loss of jobs, people have lost. Business closure, loss of jobs. A lot of people tend to reap those rewards and share with those that are most unfortunate. I know there's been donations made to the food bank. I haven't made it directly, but indirectly, I told Sam, who's my garden mate that's next to my plot in O2, he's an N2. And so you mentioned him, I think, earlier, or his name was mentioned earlier, and he's helped donate some of my produce to the food bank in years past. And so I'm just asking, because of this, I'm just asking for a postponement of these fees because it's a lot, you know. And I know the cities are. I know my time's running short, but just to get to the point, I know that a lot of cities are moving away from this, but that's what makes American Canyon special and unique, is because we have this community garden. And just hate to see people being driven away because of these fees. That's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Chris James.
So, Chris James, go ahead.
Muted.
You're muted.
I got it. Is that it?
Okay, very good. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm an assistant gardener to my chief gardener, my wife Tammy. She's been there quite a number of years now. I think she waited 5 or 6 years for her spot. I enjoy going there to help her. Probably not as much as I should, but I do enjoy going there, and I do talk to people, and I do see the camaraderie and the how people are willing to help each other. It's particularly Sam. Sam is awesome. I think the city has done a better job of freeing up lots this last couple of years. They have done a good job, but there are still some things that slip by, and I'm looking forward to their continued diligence on that. So the comments about comparing this to the city pool and a citywide resource, it's a little different to that, like charging outside people different amounts of money. It's kind of different because once someone takes a spot, they can have that for a decade or more. It could go on for years. This is, no one's, and on the renewal, no one's suggesting that someone, if you're an outside resident, that you would lose your spot to a resident. No one's going to take your spot away. Just that I think we need to give priority to new people coming in. So people don't rotate very often around in the garden. Once you have your spot, you have your spot. But I do think that we need to clean up and actually reduce the number of duplicate lots that people have. And it would be great to have a second one on the east side, maybe as part of the new developments that are going on the east side of town. And I do like the idea of capping the number of non-residents. I think that would help a lot as well. So I think that was my comments. Thank you so much. And I did send in a letter, and hopefully you've managed to read it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Kenneth Lurie is next.
Hello, good to see you. You look relaxed. You're muted.
Ken, please unmute your microphone.
All right, here I go.
No, can hear you.
Yes, the little red hand wouldn't work, so I have a few comments. First of all, I agree with it would be nice to get a community group or association together to work and manage the garden, and maybe contacting the master gardeners of Napa Valley to see if we can get some assistance there. I know there are a few members in American Canyon. And then I would give an incentive to anyone who's going to manage that particular garden that they would get a free plot, so there's some incentive there. I agree with Councilmember Joseph regarding expanding the sites. I think community gardens, I think more of neighborhood gardens, people should be able to walk there versus drive cross town to do that. And I think the more we have in the neighborhoods, the more it will bring people together in the neighborhoods where they get to know each other. So I'm in favor of expanding the site, and I do know that site in American Canyon that I walk by almost daily over here in La Vin that I'd love to see a community garden in. Just that there are a lot of deer in there that come in there, so we have to fight the deer and the rabbits. Third, regarding the plots, and I think I look at this and I'm thinking about season ticket holders. Okay, you have a certain time to renew your season ticket. So you should have priority and time to renew your plot. I don't think any plots should go unused. That would be really, really terrible. And so if people didn't renew their plots, then they go on the open market or whatever, and they probably already do that. And I would charge probably a one-time membership fee that would go to be supporting certain kinds of things that, you know, maybe tools, maybe whatever that would be there. And then that would get people to buy in and have some commitment. And then when people, you know, Frank said they inspect it once a month, so we can get an idea of when people drop out, because if people drop out, then we want to contact. Some people may move away, but some way to figure out or to be able to really know when people stop utilizing their plots. So I think that would help, but it seems like if there are people who want more plots, there's a long waiting list. I think we would behoove ourselves to expand it into the neighborhoods where people can walk to them. So those are just my comments. So I thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you tonight, and take care.
Good to hear from you, Ken.
All right.
Next speaker.
We have Justin Hamilton Hole.
Okay. Good evening, Justin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, well, when I listened to some more detail about the garden, but I am Napa Kiwanis member, Napa Kiwanis. There a way the American Kiwanis up there?
You're breaking up, Justin, I think. You're saying.
Are you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm thinking maybe in the future, I think the American Kiwanis can help there, like checking the water, check new water plant in there. And the other one is we have one garden over by the school, Dawson Way. Is that a part of American Garden?
Oh, that's the school garden.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next speaker.
Tammy Wong is next.
Okay.
Tammy Wong, please unmute your microphone.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for discussing this issue. I did send in a written comment, and I wanted to emphasize something in my written comment that I didn't hear come up, and then I wanted to give some feedback on what I've heard so far. My chief concern with these changes that are being made, and first let me say I'm glad they're being made. It's something that I've been advocating for since I've been at the community garden, which is 4 years. And I was on the waiting list for about 5 or 6 years, as my husband Chris mentioned. First, there is a dog poop issue. It may not be on the side of the garden where the mayor's plot is, but it definitely is where my plot is. I've had 2 neighbors tell me they found poop in their produce. So, and there's a number of gardens that are fenced because of that. But my big problem with how these changes were brought about is the lack of notice. As I think maybe it was perhaps the mayor mentioned, or maybe it was Heine, a lot of the gardeners there are retired. So not to stereotype, but they are older, and they may not be, I don't even know if they're on email. And that's how all the notification for this was done. That's how I find out. I got an email 2 days before the Parks and Community Services meeting. Whereas historically, for 4 years, I've been a part of the garden. Everything we get for the garden is a piece of paper in the mail. So it just seems very unfair to me that big changes like this are being done online, so that the people who aren't online, maybe people who don't do email, or maybe there's essential workers out there who in these times do not have access to check their email during the day. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons why someone would not get an email notification to participate in a discussion at the Parks and Community Services. And that leads into my second disappointment. Knowing that this was coming to City Council, there was a second opportunity to maybe send something out to let people know, hey, this is going to be discussed, hop on in. Didn't happen. And even though I submitted a written comment at Parks and Community Services, I received no notice this was being discussed. So I guess my point is, all the gardeners out there, we all talk, we're all friends, we're a community, and I let as many people know about this as was possible. And most of the people I let know about it, they had no idea this was going on. And to the last point, I do want to, I agree, for the last couple of years, Sherry Flathers has done a great job in turning over the plots. We've had so many new gardeners join these last 2 years. The first 2 years I was there, we didn't see any of that. And I understand about COVID because I'm being super cautious as well. The only problem is, if we're not enforcing that people maintain their gardens, that means we still have to deal with the weeds. So I think there needs to be a solution where if the city is going to allow gardeners to leave weeds in their plot because of these extending circumstances, maybe then they should weed whack those plots and bill the gardener, because it's not fair to be there growing your plots, tending it, and have all the weeds and whatnot growing over from your neighbor's plot into yours. So thank you for listening to my comments, and I especially hope that you will think about this difficulty with the lack of notice, particularly since we have a number of gardeners whose primary language is not English. And that's why when the renewal applications go out in the past, I get English versions and paper versions. I mean, English and Spanish versions. So we need to think about that, because our city agendas, I don't know how a non-English speaker, I don't know if there's a special Spanish version for them, or if they just sort of have to muddle their way through and find, and how they would even access this. I have no idea. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, Mayor, there are no further comments.
Very good. Okay, we'll close public comment, return to council for the discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I think
Mr. Joseph,
to Tammy's last main point about noticing, I would agree that we should do a little better job of giving people a heads up. And one suggestion might be, in this particular situation, you've got a community garden. We should be able to have a written notice that you could put into some kind of weather-resistant posting and just say, here it is, on 2 weeks, we're going to have a meeting.
Oh, there's 3 gates going in, so we can post it next to the gate?
Yeah, so I think there's some easy ways to get the word out. Because I think Tammy's got a good point. If you're not online, particularly given COVID, if you're not online, you really are, left to the curb. That at least is somewhat imposed on all of us because of COVID. But there are ways of getting the word out. And
Spanish language is quite common out there at the garden center. You can, as I mentioned,
yeah, so I do think we can do a better job getting the word out.
Yeah.
So that was my main point. Otherwise, I think a lot of this is great ideas, and we're probably at a point where we can put it back into the PCS's lap. It would appear, given the timing, that we're not in a position to do anything too dramatic for this planting season, other than maybe do some immediate steps as far as the number of plots, because that sounds like you could maybe free up 5 or 6 plots if we just said, hey, no more than 2 or something like that. But I would definitely like to explore the feasibility of looking at some other neighborhood plots. And I assure you, I did not contact Ken Leary to. This was. independent.
I certainly agree with you on it takes come up with, at least 3 of us so far on, 2 maximum type of thing, but
Yeah.
obviously this year is on roll. This, I think, will probably more apply to next year. I think that the opportunity that has been there for quite a while, and like I said earlier, is informal. It's a volunteer group of gardeners or community members as well who could help with maintenance of certainly weed control around the area.
The last
disposal of it as well.
Yeah, the last thing I'd like to mention on the rates, I recognize going from 15 to 100 is a pretty dramatic event. On the other hand, it's been $15, I believe, for as long as I've been here. So, you know, even if it was at the inflation rate, it might be 60 or 70 bucks by now. So fair is fair, but I think we got to charge a little closer to reality. Otherwise, you end up with plots that are fallow because for 15 bucks it's worth it. So I do think we need to look at the price.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
I just wonder how many plots will end up fallow at $100. So that's the other end of the scale.
Also, to Tammy's other point about different languages, non-English speakers, Jason, I know you were doing some work on that regarding the recreation guides, regarding the agenda, regarding the Nixle alerts in terms of Spanish and Tagalog. Do you have an update that you can maybe share? If not, I get it, no pressure. I just know that work has been done.
We do have the ability to provide translation in our Nixle platform. We use that for emergency purposes. We don't use it for agenda notification purposes. We do obviously have the ability to translate, and fairly, not too difficult to translate documents, notice documents, that sort of thing. I think this conversation has been really helpful for staff to hear, and just to kind of take it all back to the staff report, there is no action tonight, and there's no staff recommendation or anything else. There's no action tonight. What we're wanting to do for the first time is actually pick the council's brain on the community garden, a topic that has not, at least so far as we really know, been addressed at the council level. And so, we didn't come to this with any preconceived notion about how something should go, but we knew we needed to get in front of the council, if not just for the fee increase alone idea. Anytime there's fees being charged, the council needs to be front and center on that conversation. There is always the do nothing alternative. We have budgeted in fiscal 2021 the status quo, and given in the first week of February and the onset of a planting season in a few months, there is always the do nothing alternative. And what I mean by that is we could not change any priorities, not change the fees, whatever, and start to work on this over the next, call it 8 to 10 months. So that always is there. If the council wanted us to bring back something more limited in focus, probably at the March 2nd council meeting, this would be something in a public hearing that related to the fees themselves. So we could bring something tailored to just talk about fees for the garden, not addressing any other issues. If the council does want to get some of these issues addressed, we've heard, a variety of opinions and inputs, and recognizing there's two sides to this coin as it relates to the waiting list, as it relates to American Canyon residents waiting while residents of other cities use the garden. And so definitely lots of sides to that coin, but there is no impetus to do anything that can remain status quo. It would be fairly simple for us to close the waiting list to non-residents. That's a fairly administrative activity, and we could stop taking reservations for non-residents and could very much let the non-resident plot holders run its course, and when they stop using it, then turn it over as we've done in the past. So there's a whole spectrum of issues here, and none of which needs any action if the council is satisfied at the moment on where things are. The only point I would kind of bring up is this notion around a community group. And we hear quite a bit from American Canyon residents about a desire to have outlets for their community spirit and their volunteerism. And I do really think this is a good opportunity for that, particularly when we look at the alternative, meaning staff's out. And we've done a good job with due diligence of trying to make sure plot holders are using it and policing it and everything else. But I'm not sure that's the most cost-effective thing to have paid staff out policing the community garden when perhaps the gardeners themselves could self-police themselves if they had organized, and that camaraderie that exists out there could be turned into a positive thing. So that is definitely an interest on my part, because we try very hard to incubate good ideas and then turn those good ideas over to community groups. And this is an opportunity where we think is a good opportunity for that. And it sounds like we heard some positive feedback from council, but that's something we're going to be looking to try and do, regardless of whether the council wants to take action, on some of these more administrative tasks.
Thank you. Well, I think obviously since the season for registering is underway right now, any change on it would have to be, in my view, would be a next year change in terms of fees. And I do think the idea moving forward of limiting non-residents since for a new application could be something doable at this point. The rest of it is giving enough folks who are currently have garden plots there an opportunity to be more informed about it, has been pointed out in this meeting.
And maybe we can focus on maybe those that have the 3 and 4 plots to see if they're actively using them, or if we can talk to them informally about, are they willing to give up some of that just so that others can participate? I think that may be a solution as well, or it may free up a couple of, it might not address a wait list of 15, but it may chip away a little bit at it.
Yeah, and I recall the thought that I had in an agreement with Councilmember Apadamos, and that was, at whatever direction you go in before we add any new plots. And by the way, I'm all for new plots if they're needed. But before we do that, maybe we should look at the fee structure and what kind of impact that is, etc. So maybe we don't need, maybe that we don't need extra plots at this time based on fees, based on residency, etc. So I guess the message there is, yes, let's expand it, but let's figure out, what the real capacity is first based on a new operating structure.
And if we could get a sense of what it would cost to expand it, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking fence it and, that it's a fairly inexpensive thing, but I'm sure I'm naive in that regard. But that would be something else.
I want to provide a little bit of context here. And at the moment, the expansion of the community garden isn't on any person's work plan, and it's not something we've been working towards. And so, from staff's perspective, one of the appeals of engaging a volunteer group would be their baby. The point of having a volunteer group would be then to lead beyond just the organization and self-policing and camaraderie, is we would have them lead the effort to expand. We were not envisioning a city capital project, for example, even though relatively small, probably. We're not envisioning a city capital project that would be a community garden expansion. But we viewed the opportunity of volunteerism as this would be a community volunteer project where they could lead the expansion effort. So that's kind of where we are at this moment. Obviously, if the council wants to provide some additional direction and change things, we can. But that's going to be a different conversation as we look. We think this is well primed for volunteers to be able to do that.
I think
expansion is something that's out there for us. But I think the more immediate one is the issues that were raised tonight.
Yeah.
In terms of fees, non-residents, number of plots.
Yeah, what I'm hearing right now is the council is not interested in bumping any non-residents off who are existing, meaning they have existing plot holders and they're renewing for the year and they live someplace else. There's not an interest in bumping them off in favor of American Canyon waiting list folks. And so we can close new plot holders for outside residents, but I don't hear the council saying, we don't want to allow any non-renewals. If you've been here before, that's the one area that I'm hearing from council. I'm also hearing a little bit of variation in perspective on the multi-plots. We have, correct me if I'm wrong, Creighton, 1 or 2 with 4 and a couple with 3.
Yeah, it's 1 and 3. 1 with 4 and 3 with 3.
Right. So it would be helpful to know Vice Mayor Joseph mentioned the idea of talking to and persuading potentially from going from 4 to 2 or 3 to 2, and we can certainly talk to them. It would be helpful to know, how stern of a voice to use, although I'm always nice, how
persuasive you are.
Well,
yeah.
having walked by those plots, I know where they are. They're active.
Right. I imagine they're not 4 just sitting there vacant. I imagine these
They're
are
not full of weeds. No,
Right.
they are maybe fallow for the winter, but that's very active during the summer.
Sure. So at this point, I'm not hearing also a lot of enthusiasm around the idea of we're capping you at 2, and those that have more than 2 will no longer have more than 2, regardless of how long you've been here, regardless of where you live. We're capping everybody at 2, and so I'm not hearing that's where you want to go. I'm hearing see what you can get done persuasively, but not more matter of factly, I would say.
Yes, although now they know exactly our strategy.
Right. This will
that's the Brown Act for you.
Wait, I'm a little bit confused. So currently the policy says that there's only 1 plot allowed per household, right?
It's a handbook, not a policy, but yes, you're right.
Handbook, okay. So according to that handbook, there's only 1 plot allowed per household. Are you saying that the council direction is to increase it to 2?
What I'm hearing is not a lot of enthusiasm for, quote, enforcing this part of a handbook, which admittedly has never been to council approval either. So there are administrative documents that the city has to run its business. These administrative documents don't come always to council, depending on what level of buy-in is needed. In this case, this handbook has never been to council, and so I'm not hearing a lot of enthusiasm that would say, strictly adhere to this administrative handbook and remove anyone who has more than 1 plot. But this is the question. This is the dialogue that we got to get in.
I think that if I'm understanding it correctly, we do want to go down to 1 plot per household, but we don't want to kick people out who have spent all of this time fixing the soil, right? So ultimately at renewal, we're going to put pressure on people to start giving them up. And for new plot comers, they can't have more than 1 plot per household, correct?
Sure, and I think we can provide some tweaks on our end that sort of talk about new plot holders won't have more than 1. Plot holders that have 2 that don't use both of them are at risk of losing them both and will only have 1. That a sense of, and I think the word grandfathering was used previously, a sense of if you've been here a long time using 4, you can continue being here for as long as you want using all 4. But the moment you stop using all 4 or something new or something else is changing, then we need to drive back down that number.
And what about non-residents using more than 1 plot?
Again, I haven't heard a lot of enthusiasm for making that distinction. Certainly, I have heard enthusiasm for closing the waiting list to non-residents, but as far as existing non-residential users of 1 or more than 1, I haven't heard that distinction between resident and non-resident.
I think there should be,
Okay.
but I'm only 1. There's 5 of us. I think there should be a distinction.
And my vote doesn't count, so this is the dialogue that we're having.
No, I think closing it to non-resident for not for renewal but for new plots that's the low-hanging fruit there.
Yeah, so listen, I think we're providing guidance here, and we're asking staff and PACS to come back. I think what you heard this evening was a preference for residencies taking a priority, right? And then also for reducing the number of plots, increasing the fees at a reasonable rate. And then, also, my suggestion, and I'm thinking the rest of the council agrees, ways to grandfather that through to where it's more fair and equitable to those folks, right? And, right now the conversation I'm hearing is details. 1, 2, 3, 4. No. I don't want to make that decision. I think the community can be involved in that too, right? And so if it turns out to be PCS says, you know what, we're going to take this to more community involvement, then let's do that, right? And then let's hammer out those details and figure out a way to memorialize it that moves us forward. And I think you have enough guidance for this evening to head in that direction.
Well, I think Mr. Hawley had his question, so I think that would be what I'm looking for. Does Mr. Hawley?
Yeah, I think we have enough guidance. The last question I have, right now we're charging $15. Is there an interest for this upcoming season to have a different number, or should we postpone that conversation as part of these bigger dialogues?
I think it has to be part of a bigger dialogue when we have more involved in the conversation who are participating in the program, not that.
Yeah.
Has the application period already started? Because if people have already been applying and renewing, then it's unfair to change the rules on them midway.
It has not.
Okay. If it has not, then I think we should.
The window's open, but let's say heads up notice on it.
Yeah, I mean, and given the considerations for people not even knowing about this meeting, and we've heard that, I'm fine with status quo for this year.
Yeah.
We're working forward to something else. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is something we create a heads up for next year, but we should explore the possibility of looking at the water component of the fee as more of a variable, because that really is the big elephant in the room. And if we can encourage people to conserve water, we could bring their costs down or their fees down substantially. So throw that in the mix when you're analyzing it is all I'd suggest. But definitely next year, not this year.
Okay, very helpful conversation. I don't think we need anything else. We're not planning on bringing an item back in the near future. We are going to be seeing what we can do to engage the gardeners and get a community group formed. And hopefully the next announcement will be something like the formation of a group, and we're working on something bigger picture with them and those ideas.
Very good.
That's all we had. Thank you, Mayor.
Right, thank you. So, good discussion, I appreciate it. And certainly we'll refine this further down the road. Moving on to our agenda. Next item D3, conduct a workshop to discuss fuel station discretionary application issues in the city of American Canyon.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
By disclosure, I should say at this point, I did have a conversation with Raj from the 7-Eleven there on Broadway and a couple of the 7-Eleven corporate individuals regarding interest in putting a gas station there.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to turn over to Community Development Director Brent Cooper in one moment. This item, like the previous one, does not have any staff recommendations or any actions of the council. This is meant to also be a policy dialogue, and I'll turn it over to Brent. Thank you, Brent.
All right. Thank you, Jason, and good evening, City Council and Mayor, and happy to have a meaty discussion with you on a very interesting topic. It originated at our Planning Commission, and we're bringing it forward because we had a recent application that raised some very interesting issues, and we thought this is a good time to bring it forward to the City Council for discussion and perhaps further action later on. So I have a brief presentation for you to sort of review the issues. So I mentioned that the Planning Commission recently reviewed Circle K fuel station, and it has a convenience store attached to it. This is very close to City Hall, just north of it, at Lombard Road and Napa Junction Road. And we got some very interesting comments, a great discussion, and kind of highlighted the need that this is one of those times, kind of like brushing your teeth. Go back and take a look at the code and some of our policies and see if this is the right thing for us and you know, where do we stand as a community. So just to give you a little way of background, fuel stations are a very large contributor to the city's tax revenues. Looks like they're routinely in the top tier if you take them all together as a group. We have 3 of them. Of course, Chevron, Safeway, and Union 76, which is formerly Arco, as we all know there at the Highway and Donaldson Way. In addition to sales tax, which goes to the general fund, which then is at discretion of the City Council, gas stations also generate a gas tax, which is dedicated to being spent on road maintenance, which that too is a very important need in our community. So I alluded to issues at the Planning Commission. I I very much kind of summarized them here. And we kind of got into an interesting discussion about, is it a fuel station we're talking about or a gas station? That was a very interesting discussion, and we can talk about more about that. The other question is, we have, of course, our 3 today. The Planning Commission considered a new one, and for some time, we had some pre-applications for others. One has dropped out, and 2 have now been applied for with a conditional use permit. So we have 2 new applications on top of the one the Planning Commission just recently approved. So the question came up as to how much is enough, and that would be the issue number 2. And then the third area is every gas station requires a conditional use permit. And perhaps, for those who might be concerned about the first 2 issues, we do have a process that's very rigorous through the conditional use permit process. I'll have a little section there to talk about that too. With respect to the first station, first question is it a fuel station or a gas station? Right today, our fuel stations sell gasoline, so they're technically, I guess, gas stations. And then the governor has recently issued an executive order that was highlighted by Napa Climate Now, pointing out that the governor's goal is to eliminate new gasoline-powered automobile sales by 2035. So if that moves forward, the reason being, maybe we don't need so many places to buy gasoline. Then the question is, all right, well, if it's not gasoline, maybe there's some other fuel. But I want to first start about, in terms of our zoning code, because that's really what we work with as staff, and what we present to the Planning Commission is rooted in what does the zoning code say. And so you can look it up. It also refers to it as a service station. It's maybe kind of an antiquated definition, because we don't have too many service stations, as I recall as a young boy. Not a lot of service with self-serve. Maybe the service is the customer. Anyway, I digress. Primarily, the zoning code says these are places that sell motor fuels. So it's not saying that it has to be any particular one. It could be any number of them. So perhaps it's a fuel station, not necessarily a gas station. In addition to primarily selling fuel, it also talks about incidental maintenance. It's the part we don't do so much anymore. It puts a cap on that. It says it's not a body shop, but just incidental, maybe tires, and I've seen smog check in some of the older stations outside of our town. And then incidental purchases, as you can see there, things you might need to pick up while you're getting some gas. If we look at it as in terms of its operational characteristics, regardless of what kind of fuel is being sold, it is going to be a place that you have a lot of vehicles coming and going throughout the day, a little more than most other kinds of commercial uses you'll see. They'll have trucks that are bringing in goods, perhaps if there's a convenience store, and also deliver the fuel. Usually the hours of operation are longer than most retail stores. Oftentimes it's 24/7. Usually they pair them these days with a convenience store, and you can get all kinds of things at a convenience store. Obviously, the cookies and snacks things, but you can also get medicines, home repair things, small duty, all kinds of things, dairy, and if you're somewhere and all the stores are closed and you really need to get that medicine for your stomach, these places can be a lifesaver. So they have their role and use. I think as we, these kind of questions here or considerations, it kind of reflects some of the discussions of the Planning Commission. And they're really meant here to be food for thought. So question would be, could fuel stations switch to other fuels besides gasoline? We did talk about that at the Planning Commission, and the Circle K applicant at the time said, well, if the demand diminishes and there's other demand for new fuels, then it's not impossible for us to repurpose this site. There's plenty of room to sell other fuels. I guess even if gasoline-powered fuel vehicles are not sold after 2035, will there be none? Hard to say. I know how long I keep my car, so it's possible that they'll still be around. But obviously, as they turn over in the national vehicle fleet, electrics are certainly gaining. Most fuel stations have convenience stores, so likely, that kind of pairing, is that going to become obsolete? I don't know. We're in American Canyon in particular, and in many places, they locate fuel stations with convenience stores in high traffic area corridors, much like us. So people drive along, they eat something. Often it's a convenience. And then finally, too, who's to say that if at the end of the day this is not a good place to sell fuel anymore, perhaps these sites could be recycled to something else. Those things do happen over time, and so that's always a possibility. The second issue has to do with how much is too much. So today, of course, we know we have 3. Planning Commission approved a 4th. We did have a speaker talk about gas stations in Vallejo just across the border, and I suppose that could be relevant. Not real sure, but well, okay. And so the question posed is, well, if we approve more, do we dilute the value, what the sales might be at the individual stations we have? Not unlike the hotel workshop that we had not too long ago. That's certainly a viable question, and it's one that we pose to our new applicants. Here's just a picture for our existing fuel stations that I'm sure we've all visited at one time or another. I thought it was interesting to see kind of when they were built. The ARCO, now Union 76, the one that was built in 1999 replaced one from long ago, but it was rebuilt in 1999. So we have kind of a sequence here. 1999 is the ARCO / Union 76. A couple years later, Safeway came on board, and then another 7 years, we had the Chevron. So there's been a progression over time, and depending on perspective, that's recent or it's been a long time ago. The approved and proposed fuel stations, the one on the upper left there is a Circle K I mentioned at Lombard and Napa Junction Road. That one is a convenience store and gasoline pumps. The other proposal we have for Rod and Robbie, that one is over at Donaldson Way, Highway 29. That's a larger site, and they have gas station, convenience store, car wash, and then they have more land towards the western portion for a future retail site. And then, perhaps on the other end of the spectrum, we have the 7-Eleven. That is over by Walgreens, where the other 7-Eleven is, and this one is only the pumps. So I guess in a sense, the convenience store came first, and then now gas. Usually they're paired, but in this case, it might be different. So let's just kind of give you a range of what's proposed. I have a graphic here on this screen. I color-coded them. It's not too readable for you. The stars in blue are our existing gas stations. Here on the left-hand side in red is the Circle K. And then the 2 green stars are the proposed ones. And it's kind of interesting. It didn't really occur to me until I put this on a map how clustered they are kind of in a line with half a mile in between American Canyon and Donaldson, and then about another mile or so between Donaldson and Circle K. I just thought that was very interesting how they're kind of almost sort of paired like that. So if we look at saturation issues, I mentioned before, concern that our existing stations might have a risk of failure and abandonment. What is the current market for gasoline today? I have heard that brand loyalty matters to some customers. So if they drive through town and they don't see their brand, they'll just keep on going until they can find it. So that may be a way of being able to expand the market. And then we have the prospect of do we need fewer stations if we have fewer gasoline-powered vehicles? I think it's probably safe to say that by 2035 there will be more vehicles, perhaps fewer gasoline-powered, but certainly hard to imagine we'll have fewer vehicles. So the drivers of those vehicles, might want to go to a convenience store. Who knows what fuel might be important in the future. 2035 isn't all that far ahead. So likely electric. I know that we have in north of us, our neighbor Napa County has electric charging stations in addition to gasoline. So those folks park there and go to the convenience store. And then obsolete stations recycle to other uses, perhaps. The third issue has to do with today, when we have these applications, they're all subject to a conditional use permit. So I want to explain a little bit about that. A conditional use permit can only be approved when there are 7 findings, and those are arguments in favor of why this fits in the community. They're pretty rigorous. Just as a way of just kind of letting you know, fuel stations aren't allowed anywhere in town. They're permitted in these zoning districts that I'm showing here. All of these are adjacent to Highway 29, which probably makes sense if you think about where would your demand for gas stations be. The corridor with the most traffic. So I want to talk a little bit more about the conditional use permit finding. And so I have abbreviated the more wordy version of the code. But the first one is talking about it needs to satisfy our general plan policies and programs. It's a very high level kind of analysis. Often our zoning code, for looking at the second one, has intent. Presumably, if it is a use, it's opportunity in that district, likely to fit, but that's still a point of looking at that. Third one is Napa County Airport land use. That's kind of a generic one. I'm not sure that really is too relevant when we talk about a fuel station. Fourth one, physically suitable for type and intensity. Those are always good. Oftentimes I've heard community folks talking about, the 10 pound of sand in the 5 pound bag. So that's, is it the site suit working for that? A lot of times we'll vet through that as part of our staff technical review of the merits of the application. So by the time it goes to hearing, we have a pretty good sense. It either has worked and we're fine and we can explain why, or it hasn't worked and it probably isn't going to make the hearing. But it is a very important finding for the public and the commission that approves it, or the council on appeal, to think about. And then finally, last 3, will it maintain public health, safety, and welfare? So, there could be, these are generic, these aren't just specific to gas stations per se, but it's possible that there could be a noisy or a smelly or some kind of a use that is not compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Whereas that same use in a different neighborhood, perhaps like an industrial one, there's no one really there to bother. It was fine in one spot, but not another. And that's kind of where that 5th one is talking about. Adequate access, parking, and circulation. That's where we look very closely at intersections, road capacity in the vicinity of the site to make sure that vehicles can enter and exit safely and not have to head on into the traffic to get a turn radius. Look very closely at that. A lot of intersections at Highway 29 itself. I know I was just talking to the American Canyon Realtors last Friday, and that question came up. When we're looking at projects, do we look at the intersections at Highway 29? Because new development often brings more traffic. So do we just allow more traffic to clog up the intersections? Because there aren't that many places folks can enter onto the highway. It's an important issue. And yes, that is an issue that matters a lot. We look at it, and it's also reflected here in finding 6. And then finally, we work very closely with our partners in the Public Works Department at whether there is adequate utilities. Of course, water conservation is very important. A lot of times, new development will help extend water infrastructure. And I would point to our last Planning Commission meeting where we had the Fume conditional use permit, and they're extending a recycled water line over 400 feet to their site that can be used by the neighbors. So we do look whether or not there's adequate utilities, and many times in looking at that, they will actually fund critical extensions to our infrastructure. But like I say, that's an important issue to consider. So I think I probably covered most of this. Except to say that approval of one station, and this came up with the Circle K, does it set a precedent by approving a service station in that location for other locations? And the answer is no. They all stand on their own merits, and you can see from the findings that they're very rigorous. So just to kind of wrap up, I know I've covered a lot of territory. The Planning Commission requested some direction from the council. It's a great time to have a conversation like this. We do have that new station, Circle K, which we have 2 conditional use permit applications that the staff is in process of reviewing at this time. We have asked one for a marketing study. We are in the process of about ready to release comments on the second one, and we will ask for that as well, the second one. And then finally, this is just an opportunity to air the issues in the community and with the council, so we can begin to think about what we might want to do. So I'm glad to answer any questions this time.
Thank you for the presentation. I think it's been important. There's been a lot of conversation always about optics for American Canyon. You know, the Broadway specific plan is supposed to give us that sense of place. And the concern likewise is going to be gas station alley by building all the gas stations. So that's a legitimate concern. I think my conversation with the 7-Eleven representatives that I've met with, I've stressed with them that, you know, what it looks like is going to have a lot of effect on it if it's in fact approved. You know, mentioned there's, for example, there's a gas station north end of Yountville, very north end of Washington Street. You hardly know it's visible because of the way it's designed. Outdoor services are now more important. If there's a convenience store, what's the opportunity for outdoor seating? Since that seems to be a plan that's going to be staying in place for a lot of places that have purvey food. Competition. What's the impact? What's the saturation level for gas stations? On a mini drive in Vallejo, it is in Vallejo, different city, but competitive with anything that would be proximal here in American Canyon. So I think those things are concerned with. Future use, 7-Eleven says their application would include putting in the conduits for charging stations. Those will certainly be probably a reuse prospect for at least for through traffic. Locals would probably charge their car at home. I think the governor's plan for no gasoline-powered cars by 2035 is very ambitious. I seriously doubt that can be met, given the ability to turn over and build enough infrastructure for vehicle charging. So we did have a sit down with an individual some time ago who had an electric car. He's part of the environmental community and worked out the economics of owning a gasoline car versus an electric car, and makes a very good argument economically for owning electric. So yeah, other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Vice Mayor Joseph, yes, your hand's up.
Yeah, I've kind of evolved on this issue over the last few months. I started off thinking, well, call them a fuel station. You know, just because it's gasoline now, it can have charging stations. And to some extent, I think that does make sense. But if you start projecting forward, you begin to realize that as we get into electric charging vehicles, what you need is some place to park your car for 20 or 30 minutes. You could have a row of charging stations at a fueling station, but as Chris James pointed out in one of his comments, it makes far more sense that it'll be integrated into the parking lots of Walmarts or Targets or whatever. And it just, if you think about it, it simply makes more sense that that's how the evolution of electric charging stations is going to play out. So, in my mind, I think we are at a point in which a saturation study in and of itself probably isn't going to be very instructive because it's going to be relying on the existing business model. I don't know if they can plug in, you know, what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years. Not just with electric vehicles, but if you believe the hype with the self or autonomous vehicles, we may not even have as many vehicles because one car can do the bidding of 2 or 3 people or something. So I think in the next 10, 20 years, we're looking at a wholesale shift in how we conceive of service stations. And I think we should try to be a little proactive in that regard. So then you get into the reuse concept. There's a lot of, I mean, at one point you could say, well, just bulldoze everything and start from scratch. That would be ideal. But financially, that's not practical. So then you get I've got a gas station that I'm just going to convert into something, and it's going to look like a gas station, only not as attractive. And frankly, I'm thinking of some gas stations in Napa along Saw School. So I am a little concerned that just saying, oh, well, when they become obsolete, we'll recycle them. We will, but they're not going to be particularly appealing. And so that really gets us back to the Broadway District Specific Plan. And some of the discussion we had at our retreat, this idea that we really need to go beyond just the plan and start talking, as Councilman Baroro brought up, this idea of an incentives plan, something that allows us to say these are the things we want to see happen. The plan kind of creates the minimum. You're entitled to go through the process, but this is what we're looking for. And these are the incentives we want to offer you to kind of direct that opportunity. So for me, I think at the macro level, we need to be talking about an incentives plan. How do we implement the Broadway specific plan? And then at the micro level, I have some real concerns about where gas stations are going to be in the next 10 to 15 years. And we should be trying to figure out how do we craft conditions to address that and to protect this community and the aesthetics of this community. So that's where I'm at.
I'd like to just mention real quick, if you don't mind, Vice Mayor Joseph and I, we met with some youth last week, Schools for Climate Action. Some very, very intelligent young people. And the way I look at it is young people who will be sitting in our seats in the future. And they had concerns about global warming and the association to global warming and gas stations. And I took it to heart, and I've done some research on it. And I think that we need to be making decisions based on what those youth will be handed over to them. And I think we need to take a real good look at what we're talking about. You got to believe in global warming. The odors, the spillage. And we talk about we don't want to have an abandoned gas station. You know, a lot of people don't realize we have one. It's been torn down. There was the old USA gas station. And we can't put anything there. Why? Because of the spillage, because of the environmental hazards that come and that are associated with it. So I think as a council, we need to do some research on what the past failures have happened and how this really affects our community, our youth, and our roadways. If you could tell me what we could put over there right now in the USA location, that might give me some hope to reconsider. But right now, I just can't see it, and I'm an advocate for those kids that we met, those youth that we met with from the school climate action. I think that they've done their research, and I think that they're trying to plan for their future, which is our future when we become very seasoned.
Comment?
Mr. Mayor, I have a few comments.
Please go ahead.
Councilmember Washington, I really appreciate you bringing up that gas station because I remember it being there and I remember it sitting vacant for several years. And then it finally was torn down and it was not pretty. So we're talking about the Broadway District Specific Plan and beautifying Highway 29 and having, because that's, you know, the main thoroughfare, that's what people see when they come into American Canyon. I'm going to be very frank. I was disappointed at the Planning Commission's approval of the Circle K gas station. If you remember, a while back, we received a presentation from some residents who wanted to build a gas station and a Shake Shack. And so they came before the council and they presented to us, and I sat at the dais and I said, I don't believe that this is consistent with our economic development plan. Although we haven't formally adopted it yet, we did put a lot of time into it. We did solicit community input, and nobody said we wanted more gas stations. We said, our residents said we wanted higher paying jobs so that people no longer have to commute out of town. Our residents wanted specific retail. We all know Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, et cetera, but nobody said we wanted more gas stations. And I feel like at that point is when we should have had this conversation, not after yet another gas station was approved. So I'm a little bit disappointed in that. I would really like to consider, for the council to consider, bringing this decision back to the council so that we can have a conversation of whether we want to see the Circle K come into American Canyon or not. And if the council is not willing to consider that, I would like us to figure out moving forward how to not bring in any more gas stations. Brent, you mentioned 3 gas stations in town, but you didn't mention the Chevron gas station, which is right up the road on Devlin. It's not that far. It's yet another gas station. Other than that, how far do you go into Napa before you can find gas stations? We have them way too close together. And we're trying to beautify American Canyon. We're trying to have this get put on the map. Like Councilmember Oro always says, we want to be a destination, not a drive-through. And by adding gas stations, that's the definition of a drive-through, a highway. So those are my 2 cents. I'm not happy about the Planning Commission's decision. It's not my job to overturn them, but it is my job to be a responsible council member and ask for those decisions to come back for a second review. And that's what I would like my colleagues to consider.
So I appreciate some of the deep thinking that's going on here and trying to predict the future. There's also the practicality of today. First, I want to comment on Circle K. I followed that through some of the news, and I also read some of the packets and reports. And I also know that piece of property. And I've always asked, what else could go there? And I think the Planning Commission asked some tough questions and also gave the thought that was just recently shared with Miriam and everybody in terms of how do you want to see this corridor be developed? And I think they made a measured decision to approve that project and weighed it seriously. I don't necessarily think it needs to come back to us. It's a funky corner. You know, I mean, we even looked at it as a city as a possible location for the new fire station, and it wouldn't even work for that. So if somebody can develop that, we can get some tax revenues for it, all power to them. So now we are a town of 4 gas stations, if that's right. Yep, 2, 4. There's possibly 6. You know, I'm just kind of looking at this, and I haven't heard from any of the other applicants or anything. But I'll tell you this on the proposed 7-Eleven one. I'd prefer to see a little retail village over there versus another gas station. You know, there's that pocket corner over there, and I guess that's the southeast corner of American Canyon, and it's starting to thrive on its own. And you have the village at Vintage Ranch. Wouldn't it be great for them to walk across the street and get a coffee at a Pete's or some little small breakfast shop? You know, and that's, you know, we're not too far away from the high school. It's the closest retail to the high school. Can students go there afterwards and hang out? You know, I mean, if I was a student, I'd be making use of that pizzeria for sure, as well as a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. So, you know, I'm hesitant to put a gas station there too, and also because, you know, just the way it flows. And I heard so many promises from the developer in the years past of what they were going to do with that spot, and I think there's just probably a better opportunity for that. With regards to the Rotten Robin, is it Rotten Robbie? I think it is. You know, you got to see it, you got to weigh it, but you get. I'm no, you know, market study expert, but I'm thinking we're hitting capacity here on gas stations, but if you look at the map that Mr. Cooper showed earlier, they are evenly distributed. You got them in the north, you got them in the south part, and then you got them right in the middle. Everybody can pick their own favorite gas station closest to their house. You know, in terms of the future, you know, we heard from Kate Miller, the executive director of MBTA, probably close to 4 years ago, that, you know, we were going to have driverless cars in the future, and that's why you can't have 3 lanes going down Highway 29. You are not going to get driverless cars for another 20 years, at least in terms of whatever, and in terms of, you know, mainstream adoption. It's still a long way out. I work in tech, and I know what goes into that thing, and they've come a long way, but they're not going to get there. But even then, you're still one person per car, just one person's not driving it. It's not going to be a bus where people get on it. People are going to have their own driverless car to go from there. So I don't think that they're going to have to use that. So, you know, I don't know what sort of input staff would think, but, you know, there's convenience now, and there are things that there's still an opportunity now to service the community through additional retail via fuel station, right? And we can meet the needs now if there is that need. And, you know, I don't think these gas stations or these businesses put it in here without doing their own market study and suggesting that they can succeed. Those are my thoughts.
Mr. Mayor, it might be appropriate to just go over some fence lines in terms of what the powers are with respect to the specific plan and the facts that exist right now. Go
ahead.
I think number one, you know, the issue of Circle K, I think that's over. I mean, that's the October 26th. There's a 30-day call-up period for that if the council was going to review that. So they have a final permit. Whether they proceed to construction or not is the other question for them to acquire what's known as a vested right. Once you get a vested right, which is a building permit and the expenditure of a substantial amount of funds, the rules can't be changed. Sometimes when issues like this come up of controversy in a city or a county, there's kind of a, you know, some attorneys have phrased it, the rush to the switch on the pump house door. It becomes evident that the agency wants to change either the zoning or the specific plan to put further conditions on a particular use or outright ban it. And so the applicant, let's just say it's Circle K in this instance, accelerates its effort to get the building permit and to put kind of a euphemism is concrete and steel in the ground, meaning a foundation. What are your powers the other way? You can adopt an interim ordinance to study a land use. You know, initially you can have a 45-day period. You can extend that, and that has to be done by a 4/5 vote, though, however, of the council, and that provides you the shield so that applications don't keep coming in under a standard that you're convinced needs to be modified in some way. You have great discretion in how you modify the standards for development. You know, what do I mean? Well, the Walmart store that you have in town now was the reflective of a big dispute about how much you can say in zoning or a specific plan. One city said, we're going to ban discount stores. And if I remember correctly, that case is about 15 years over now, and Walmart litigated it and said you can't do that under your zoning ordinance, and it went all the way up in the Supreme Court in the state, and the Supreme Court said, yes, you can. You know, the other kind of thing is, okay, if it's not a use, can you do something to preserve aesthetics? You've got a lot of goals and policies in the Broadway District Plan about you want the kind of enticing things associated with the roadway that, quite frankly, seem antithetical with a gasoline station or a fuel stop. Case involving the city of Concord. There was a great concern about having recreational vehicles in front yards, not in driveways, but in front yards. And that ordinance was challenged. I think, whether that result would be the same today or not, I don't know, but it also went fairly high up the appellate chain, and the court said, look, you have the power under land use to designate aesthetic concerns. I think there are certainly aesthetic concerns concerning the BDSP corridor. So you have a lot of tools in the toolbox here. But, if you're of a common mind about that this issue needs to be addressed further in some way, but you can't articulate it yet, then the concept of an interim moratorium is kind of thing that you might want to consider. The advice would be to be as specific as possible, because, a lot of people hear the word moratorium and they take the wrong reaction. But a moratorium is a planning tool. It allows you the time to take a breath, go back and say, well, under this section of the BDSP, maybe we should have 3 or 4 more standards. Maybe in this zoning designation for commercial, maybe we should have some more criteria. So I think that general summary of what you can do, I think ought to be factored into how you address the issue. I'm not going to say it's a problem, because I think it's an issue. A lot of people view this differently, but you did go through an extensive time period, with the exclusion of Councilmember Washington, of getting the BDSP adopted and going through, like you recognized last Friday, let's just say a idealistic lawsuit. It wasn't really concerned with the content. It was concerned with the adoption of specific policies, for a wider goal, not reflecting on what you wanted to do right here, because that same individual has done the same type of lawsuits in other jurisdictions. So I think that's the summary I'd give, to give some, what are the legal constraints, what are the legal powers? This is land use. You got a great deal of flexibility.
I appreciate that. And the one other thing I'd like to add that I forgot to when I first spoke, in addition to my general reservations, I have to be honest, I do have some concerns with the Donaldson site, primarily because it is part of the home improvement overlay. And although I don't know if everybody has embraced it as much as I have, I think the opportunity to have Mid-City Nursery, Broadway Landscaping, a hardware store, a paint store, looking at that corner in that perspective, I think there's some opportunities to create a retail orientation in which you may have the equivalent of a home improvement center, but in the form of a variety of small mom and pop shops. And my concern is, even though a gas station is a permitted use, in my mind, the intent of that particular location is to encourage home improvement related businesses. And it gets back to that incentives plan. We have a plan that envisions some things, but technically allows some things that aren't as appealing. And what we need to do is be a little more assertive, and maybe we use the zoning powers and the land tool power or land use powers the city attorney mentioned, or others, but I do think there may be a better use of that particular section of our district corridor than a gas station. So that I might be more sympathetic elsewhere, but in that particular area, I'd like to at least try the home improvement first, and if that doesn't work, then go to something else.
My concern in that area is the congestion. It's the safe route to school from the whole east side to the west side. It's a very narrow road. Narrows down even more. We've done some traffic calming with our engineering on the intersections, and I just would be concerned that the number of vehicles in there and kids on bicycles or walking pedestrians, not a good mix. So that would be my concern in that area.
One last point, Mr. Mayor. Well, maybe one other point. I don't know that I would ever have a last point. I want to advance something that the city manager raised, and regardless of what the issue is, whether it's gas stations or fortune teller stores, what developers want is certainty. And so the more you can define what is an allowed use, that facilitates both you in terms of what you will allow and what you want, but it also puts you in a position where you have definite standards that developers have to meet, and they appreciate that standard because, I'll just say it my way. They'll come in and say, this is what you said you want. I'm applying for that. I've done, and Brett said it too in his way. I've done 1 through 754. So can we get going on my project? You've met all the conditions. But the more you can say about what the use is, that is beneficial.
Yeah.
I don't think you should think of over-regulation in that context in land use.
Other comment? Council ready for public comment on the matter? Public comment is now open. You're muted. Ms. Walton.
We currently have a comment from Chris James.
Very good.
Hi, Chris.
There you go. Another. Yeah, thank you again for. Yeah, thank you. So, per my letter or my email I sent in, you can see that I'm opposed to new gas stations, but I do appreciate the conversation that's gone today, and I'm, kind of pleased by some of the comments that I've heard. One thing I would like to say is we have to. There's two sides to this. This is what we need today, and is it oversaturation that's being brought up, and what's going to happen tomorrow. So we need to keep keep those two separate things, right? But the future is coming quite quickly toward us, right? GM and other automakers have gone and said they're accelerating their move to electric cars. And as Mark pointed out from my comments, people are going to feel up at home or at when they're shopping. Most of the time, on long trips you would stop off, but then again you'd be looking for retail to entertain the kids, take them to a restaurant, sit down for half an hour and have a meal. You're not going to do that at a 7-Eleven, right? That's not luxury dining or anything, right? And ultimately, there's no differentiation between all of these gas stations when it comes, if they flip over to electric. It's ultimately the electric is electric. It comes from PG&E. It may come from solar or whatever, but it's really PG&E that's delivering, and the costs aren't going to be that great difference between different places. So it's differentiating there. I wanted to point out there are other new gas stations appearing around us as well. There's a brand new 7-Eleven on Airport Boulevard at Devlin, not the existing Chevron, but a brand new 7-Eleven on Airport Boulevard, very close to 29. So with the increased traffic on Devlin, that's going to get very busy there. I'm also very concerned about the blight, and I really appreciate the bringing up examples of the city where we do have blight from these existing gas stations. The developers will promise that they will clean up, but when they go out of business, they go bankrupt, and they just abandon these things. And one last thing then, David was saying about driverless cars. I would agree that we probably want to have driverless cars anytime soon, but autonomous cars are definitely here. I can send you some videos. We'll show you Tesla cars, doing amazing things on the road in the very, very near future. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Chris Benz.
Thank you.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, and I'm speaking for Napa Climate Now. I'd like to commend the staff and City Council for making the time to talk about these gas station applications. I learned two things last year while researching the Circle K project. The first was that the Broadway District Specific Plan is a very well thought out plan that was developed with a tremendous amount of community input. Desirable businesses from the community survey included grocery stores, restaurants, destinations and activities, and more retail. Gas stations weren't in the mix. The second thing I learned is don't be afraid to ask for what you want from new developments. One of the guiding principles of the plan is to, quote, provide gathering and multi-purpose places. When I spoke with the Circle K project developer, Ross Hillesheim, he indicated that had he known about the desire for gathering places at the start of the project, that was something that could have been included. So as you evaluate future projects, ask for what the community wants. American Canyon has a beautiful central location, and it will be greatly enhanced by the Watson Ranch development. So we ask, as you move forward, believe in your plan, believe in your worth, and believe in your community. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Emily Bitt.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Bitt, and I'm a current junior at American Canyon High. I'm here tonight with Elisa Kresh from Napa High, speaking on behalf of Schools for Climate Action, based in Napa County. I first wanted to say thank you to Mr. Washington for valuing our words and concerns. We truly appreciate you hearing us out and including our perspective in this crucial discussion. On that note, it's come to our attention that in today's meeting, the recent gas station approvals and proposals that have been brewing in American Canyon are being discussed. So we would like to speak on behalf of our youth, of our county, and urge our local elected officials, the Planning Commission, staff, and more to reconsider these decisions. The most recent Circle K gas station that was approved in the fall of 2020 is in very close proximity to one of the 3 elementary schools in American Canyon, Napa Junction. In fact, it's so close that it is 3 minutes away walking distance. As stated by the World Health Organization, air pollution impacts neurodevelopment, cognitive ability, and children who've been exposed to high levels of air pollution are at greater risk for chronic diseases later in life. In the staff report, we took special notice of the fiscal impact that was included, which is why we would like to directly ask our local leaders, is putting the health of our community and of our future generations at risk really worth it? Is it fair to subject children of very large amounts to these dangerous health conditions? Additionally, we'd like to call attention to the fact that the only main electric charging stations in our city are really clustered in parking lots. To promote a green future, we should be spreading these charging stations and clean energy fuels throughout our city and including them in our gas stations to normalize them. So we're calling upon you now to make the right choices, ones that will ensure American Canyon is thriving in all aspects far after we're gone. Throughout Mr. Cooper's presentation, I noticed that all of the new gas station proposals all only include fossil fuel pumps. There's no point in changing the name to fuel station if we're continuing to only have gasoline pumps at these sites. Although it's hard, we must stop doing wrong, and the only time we have left is the present. If possible, I'd like to pass this off to Elisa Kresh. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Patrick Band is next.
I think she had somebody, the other speaker was with Emily, but, oh, there's Patrick Band, okay.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. Patrick Band, Executive Director of the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. I want to echo many of the comments made this evening already in public comment and raise a couple of additional issues. I'd like to first note that in the city's adopted bicycle plan, which was adopted in 2020, we have a goal of a 10% mode shift, or rather mode share, for bicycle trips by 2035. That was adopted as part of the general plan, and that can be a tremendous tool as we look at not just encouraging more vehicle use, but shifting people from vehicles to bicycles, walking, and other forms of active transportation. Secondly, I want to note, with regard to the comment made by Mayor Garcia about safe routes to schools, ensuring that our kids, our most vulnerable residents, have safe ways to get around our communities is going to continue to be vitally important. We have planned Class 1 mixed-use pathways, north and south on both sides of Broadway, under the new plans that have been adopted by Caltrans. And those are going to provide tremendous opportunity for both north-south and improved east-west access across Broadway in the future. We want to make sure that any new uses that are put into sites within the Broadway specific plan support the goals of the general plan, the bicycle plan, and safety for all of our residents. Lastly, the Bicycle Coalition really encourages the council to take a fully holistic view of what community health really means when we're looking at what types of new projects are being adopted and approved through the Planning Commission and or council. Our view is that in most cases, gas stations are not going to meet the highest and best use of land and the highest and best future for the city of American Canyon and its residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
All right, Emily, did you have another comment to make?
I think that Elisa Koresh is raising her hand right now, and I would like to pass it to her.
Okay.
Jim Wilson is next.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is Jim Wilson. I live in Napa. I'm with 350 Bay Area and its local affiliate, Napa Climate Now. I teach climate responsibility in the schools, and I'm liaison to Schools for Climate Action here in our local school district. I appreciate the Planning Commission recommending this investigation, and I want to thank you, Council, for following up. It's abundantly clear to us now that our dirty energy system is ruining the climate. It isn't just about the environment, it's about jobs and the economy, security, and dignity. We learned that abundantly last year. According to the UN Environment Program in its 2019 report, globally we need to slash emissions 7.6% per year for the next 10 years in order to meet the 1.5 degrees C Paris target. On current pledges, we're headed for a catastrophic 3.2 degrees C temperature rise. The science is terrifying, informing us the greenhouse gases are higher than they've been in a million years and rising, and it predicts the near future in no uncertain terms. Yet to get out of gas, financial incentives are available to help Californians of all income levels, especially the lower income levels, go electric. And the paradigm for fueling our cars is changing. Most people with electric vehicles charge their cars at home or at work. They don't need to drive to the pump. In 2019, the Unified School District declared a climate emergency. In their resolution, students demanded and received their two non-negotiables. First, acknowledge a climate emergency, and second, set a goal of net zero climate pollution by or before 2030. That same year, cities in the county and the county government adopted their countywide commitment to address climate change. In it, American Canyon acknowledged the IPCC special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees C. It states that to limit this warming would require rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. Thank you, American Canyon, for doing that. Also in 2019, a month after declaring a climate emergency, Petaluma passed a temporary urgency ordinance prohibiting the approval of any new gas station applications. That interim ordinance has since been extended, and now there's a growing number of jurisdictions in Sonoma County considering bans on new gas stations. Elected officials can show solidarity with their youth on this issue. Our kids bear the brunt of our carbon pollution. Let American Canyon be the first city in Napa County to declare a climate emergency, along with the kids. And at the same time, take the first step in reducing climate pollution by putting a firm date on capping additional gas infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Elisa?
Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, speak up a little louder, please.
Oh, okay. Well,
That's
hello.
better.
Oh, is that okay? That's good. Hello, everyone. My name is Elisa Koresh, and as Emily stated prior, I'm a current junior at Napa High School. Although Emily and I attend different schools, we both have the same ambitious goal for our county's emissions to decrease to net zero by or before the year 2030. Jim Wilson referenced the esteemed IPCC special report from 2018, which stated limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius would require very drastic and fast changes. We understand the discomfort towards the rapid changes that must be made. We understand the difficulties you are all facing as you attempt to tackle such difficult, demanding and important issue. However, change must begin now. Emily and I are just two students. Our power lies within using our voice and standing with our beliefs. By the time we're college graduates, and by the time that we will be old enough to fill your positions, it will be too late. Taking the right steps towards a promising future is what we need now. We want to remind you that our generation and future generations depend on the drastic transition from fossil fuels to alternative fuels, and this transition begins with limiting the approval of new gas stations. Thank you all for your hard work and dedication to Napa County. We are very happy to see that so many of you are also hesitant to approve more gas stations. We have the utmost respect for you and are thankful to have thoughtful and altruistic individuals running our cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
There are no further comments.
Okay, very good. We'll close public comment on this. I see Mr. Tom Robinson.
Yeah, let me unmute. I'm a little confused. My name's Tom Robinson. With Rotten Robbie, one of the projects that you're maybe talking about. Yesterday, we had gotten an email from Brent Cooper regarding this workshop, and he'd asked for our participation and perspective. So I was kind of thought that maybe at some point in time, you're going to ask for our participation and perspective. So I didn't know exactly how you were doing it. Anyway, basically, there's what I hear you talking about are two different issues. One is oversaturation, and the other is the future of fuels or climate change. And they're somewhat related, and they're somewhat overlapped, and I just made some various notes, and so bear with me as I kind of bounce around between one versus the other. To start off with about the whole thing about a gas station, yes, we have fuel. We will also have a very large convenience store, and we will have a car wash. It'll be mini services. There will be EV charging. There will be bike parking. There will be outdoor seating. It will be big and attractive, but I don't think that's the issue right now about how attractive it might be. Regarding the issue of oversaturation, just kind of going down my list, Broadway, Highway 29 is a huge traffic count corridor. It's both residents of the city and a whole bunch of transients. From an issue of oversaturation, that is not your problem. In fact, I think that it's your opportunity in many respects. There is so much commuter traffic going through there, and I think in one of the earlier slides it indicated the amount of sales tax dollars that go to the city, and so those sales tax dollars are going to go to a city. There is no doubt about it. With all of those vehicles that are driving up and down Broadway, they're going to go to the city. It's your choice whether American Canyon gets to harvest those tax dollars, and it's a significant amount. I think that in particular, even there's a comment about the possibility of cannibalizing the sales tax. You know, you're talking about 6 locations on a very high traffic street, and 6 locations isn't that much. I mean, if anything, we would have a concern about not being able to get the business, and that's certainly not our concern. You know, the reality is, in our business, we all want the corners. Primarily, we want the corners with stoplights, because you've got to have ingress and egress. And you have about 6. I mean, give or take, that's about what you have. Those are key spots for fueling, for the convenience store, and all of that. The other thing, and it kind of falls in the oversaturation, is the concern about, well, what about stranded assets? I'm old enough, and I think some of you might also be old enough to remember the situation in many cities where there's 3 or 4 gas stations on an intersection. Then you go down the next intersection and you got 3 or 4 gas stations. And there aren't 3 or 4 gas stations there anymore. At one time, the transition was to savings and loans and banks, and then they went to QSRs, things like McDonald's and stuff, and then they became drugstores. But they weren't stranded assets because, quite frankly, they were good properties. So I don't think that you have a real concern about stranded assets going forward, especially if you've got a dynamic economy. If you don't, that's a different problem. Relative to the future of fuels, the reality is they all have some sorts of challenges. I mean, even electricity has some challenges. And so we're obviously going to have cars and trucks for a long time. Will they be running on electricity? Will they be running on fossil fuel? Will it be a cleaner burning fossil fuel? Will it be renewable gasoline or diesel? Will it be hydrogen, which is really clean? 2035 is a ways off, and things don't always go as planned. And even in 2035, you're going to have a whole fleet of internal combustion engines. So, I mean, I think that's the reality as you're moving forward. And again, I think that only time will tell how things sort out. I guess really those are probably my main points. I think that what the city should do is try not to micromanage their development, but make sure that they have high standards on their development. If that's the case, we're very confident that we can meet your high standards. I think that obviously cities need to worry about tax revenues. I think that's important. If nothing else, I had to laugh because there's nothing else you need for the community garden. I do think the really key thing for us is we have to understand sort of where you're coming from. And I think that Mr. Ross pointed that out. We have to have some sort of certainty. We're not a big company. We're not going to sue you. We're not like Walmart. I mean, if you don't want us, I mean, you do have a lot of, you have the ability to deny us. I mean, I recognize that. And it's not worth fighting it if you really don't want it. But I counsel you to make sure that you're looking at companies and you're looking at uses, and I don't think that you necessarily want to be I don't think you want to be anti-company like us. I think that we do a good job day in and day out. So with that, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Mayor, you're on mute.
Next speaker? Anybody else? Hearing none? Nobody's raising their hand? Okay, well, then I'll close public comment. We'll take it back to council for this.
Sorry, we do have a public comment if you wanted to go. It's Kenneth Murray.
That's what I'm looking for, yes.
Hi, Ken. Ken, unmute your microphone.
Go. Kenneth Leary, City of American Canyon.
Oh, go ahead.
You know, I wasn't going to weigh in on this. I think all the speakers before Mr. Robertson spoke was spot on what American Canyon wants. And like he said, some other city will take the sales tax and run with it. I don't see that as the concern of the citizens of American Canyon. It's not my concern to have additional gas stations. The Broadway specific plan and the community engagement that we participated in stated that. Many of the speakers before stated that and supported that. You know, we are starved for revenues. And we are starved for revenues that we continue to rely on large interests to come into our towns and say, here, I give you some trickle-down sales tax. That's not good enough. That's not going to create the kind of community that our citizens say that they want. We took years to create the Broadway specific plan. In that plan, there weren't any additional gas stations. We should stay true to this plan, true to what we want our community to become. And we may have to work a little bit harder to get there, but I think our residents, and definitely I am willing to do that. So that's what I have to say. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Any other public comment, speaker?
There are no other comments.
All right. At this point, we will close public comment. Return to City Council for further discussion, desired action.
I'd like the city manager or the community development director to remind us that what they're looking for again, now that we've had, everybody said their piece, right? And so let us know what direction you're looking for and some guidance that we can provide you.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give Brendan an opportunity as well, but it's been a very healthy conversation and really appreciate the council providing the feedback. We come to this point tonight because the Planning Commission voiced its concern. You know, it had participated in the Broadway plan, and it voiced its concern with what it felt like the signals from the city council were in approving that plan and the direction sense. It felt like it had received the signals, and it felt like the Circle K project checked those boxes, but it also felt a little uneasy with that. And it felt like, gosh, we really ought to check in with the council, particularly knowing there are other gas stations pending. I think the Planning Commission did its job that it was asked to do in approving Circle K, but it also did its job by raising its voice and raising its hand saying, council, we probably need to check in. And so that's what we're doing tonight. I think we've gotten the feedback that we can bring back to the commission. I think we understand some of the guardrails that exist from the framework that the city attorney provided. I think we understand the perspectives of the council. And, you know, I'll let Brent kind of chime in here, but this was something that the Planning Commission had said we need to talk about. And so in honoring that request, that's why we're here. And I think we've gotten a lot of great feedback. Anything else, Brent?
Yeah, I think just to add on to what you're saying, the way I look at this is we have an issue that needs to be aired. You never really know how the conversation will go until you have it. And so I've taken a lot of notes. I think it's great feedback from a broad spectrum of people. We'll be able to go through that and look for patterns and kind of come up with some bullet points and things, kind of distill it. And then we can think about a strategy on how we might approach a more specific process to get through on how to come up with a consensus on where to go from here. There's a couple different directions I've heard, and we can offer up options and see what folks like.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just make a couple of final comments myself. I think Mr. Robinson makes a very good point that from a financial point of view and as a former finance person, yes, he's absolutely right. Gas stations and fast foods are probably the most financially lucrative things a city can go for. They also cumulatively are aesthetically not the most appealing. So there's always going to be a challenge between how can you make some easy money versus how can you make a greater community. And because we are part of the Napa Valley, we have the potential to be more than just a string of gas stations and fast food stores. And so as much as I can readily see the value of making it easy to balance a budget with 25 or 50 grand a pop with relatively little cost other than traffic and perhaps quality of life, I think we have an opportunity to do better. Not necessarily to criticize any gas station owner per se. I think because we are part of that Napa Valley, we have the potential to do a better job than another city somewhere else. And then the second point, and I'm probably the only one on the council who is really psyched about the home improvement overlay concept, but trust me, it has some real potential to be a sales tax generating opportunity. And so a specific suggestion is rethink our zoning ordinance as it relates to that particular overlay and take gas stations out and rethink the permitted uses in the overlay zone area as a specific. And then again, to reemphasize, we really need to look at an incentives plan for this project so that we have a little more control over the destiny of how that corridor evolves and be prepared to put some money where our mouth is. And that again is what Councilman Oro has talked about, and I think to me that's the most important thing to do. And then the specifics, I really have a problem with the geographic location of this the Rotten Robbie proposal, just because of where it happens to be. Again, those are my remarks. It turned out to be 3 and not just 2.
Well, thank you for sharing your comments.
One thing that I just wanted to reiterate, it sounds like council is clear on not wanting more gas stations and not wanting to be fast food / gas station central. And like Vice Mayor Joseph mentioned, they are easy money, but they are also the two things that we get yelled at the most by our constituents. So I just wanted to remind the council, part of BDSP is to slow down traffic on 29 and get as many of those cars off the road as possible and encourage people to walk and encourage people to ride bikes. And if they're looking for a bypass road, to use the Newell extension eventually. So what's going to happen at that point, even if fuel is not discontinued, gas cars are not discontinued by 2035, like the governor ambitiously hopes for, we're still getting cars away from that road. So then are we going to get a ton of more gas stations and gas station applications on Newell? And how are residents going to feel about that? So just my 2 more cents.
Yeah, listen, I think it's tough for me to say, but if there was another gas station, it's like, in my view, it's one more. And as Mr. Robinson was talking, I was just talking about market saturation and concerns around that and the opportunity to capture what used to be 56,000 cars going through town a day, probably now 35 with the pandemic. There could be a business case for that. And I'm not necessarily saying I am against another gas station, but I think we are at the line of where there's too many. And I had to think to myself, well, if I ever had a problem getting gas in town, and where I live on the east side of town, I can hop into the 76 because it's right there, or I could save a few bucks and go to Safeway, which at times, depending on when you go, I might have to wait a few minutes. It's not a Costco line of sorts, but, it is busy and steady. And then, I may go to Chevron just because I'm headed up north, and I try not to because it's the most expensive one in town. So I've never really had a problem with getting gas here. And so that makes me think through, do I need another gas station? I don't know. But at the same time, we're expanding Broadway. We're adding Watson Ranch, and that's going to be another 4,000 residents. And traffic will return. So there might be a possibility for that. So just a couple of closing comments there. Again, my thing is I'm not opposed to maybe one more, but 6 in town seems a little excessive. But I hear all the concerns from everybody who probably spoke up today, and I appreciate all the comments. Thank you.
It appears we may be having some technical difficulties with Mayor Garcia right now on his computer. At the moment, it appears we're kind of done with this conversation. It would be appropriate, Mark, if you wanted to kind of close out this item, we can go into the next agenda item as they try and get Mayor Garcia's technical issues addressed.
Very well. Again, if there's no other comments from council, the idea is that staff has received as much input as you could expect, and you'll be able to move forward. And the applicant, prospective applicant, has also had that opportunity to hear our input and vote from the comments. So unless there's anything else, we'll move on to, I believe, management and staff reports.
Wait, I just want to clarify one thing. So at this point, staff is going to come back to us on a new policy for gas stations, or are we doing a temporary moratorium? What's happening now? What's the next part here?
Staff is going to go back and discuss this. We've not received direction to proceed with the moratorium. We've not decided exactly, what we're going to bring back to council. We're going to talk. Staff is going to talk amongst ourselves with legal counsel, and we'll probably have a conversation with the potential candidates that have had an opportunity to join us tonight, and we're going to go from there. I would say there's no specific items right now. We've heard the input from the council, and we're providing that input back to the Planning Commission. And we're going to take that input and feed it into the development process that's currently underway.
So there's 2 applications currently submitted. Are those going to go to Planning Commission and potentially be approved without coming back to council? What's going to happen with those?
It looks like Mayor Garcia has joined us. So the process right now is no different than it was when we started, in the sense that Planning Commission can approve a conditional use permit. That's not to say that they're lined up to do that on any of these applications. We're still reviewing all of those items, and I don't believe either have been deemed complete. Is that correct, Brent?
That's correct.
Yeah, both applications are currently incomplete. So part of that completeness process is us, staff, getting from the applicant all the materials that would be necessary to bring to the Planning Commission. And I would say bring to the Planning Commission under the paradigm of this more clear understanding of what the council wants to provide as far as guidance to the Planning Commission. Right now, the authority to approve projects, many projects, all kinds of different projects in BDSP lies with the Planning Commission. What wasn't as clear for the Planning Commission and admittedly staff was the council's further guidance on what that really should look and feel like. And so, as we're implementing BDSP at the moment, staff has taken this guidance. We'll be giving it to Planning Commission and guiding the development process through this more refined understanding.
And I can appreciate that, except from this perspective. If the council has some reservations, but we don't change anything, then the legal process is we go through it. The applicant, I'm sure, will be able to meet the 7 standards. It'll be approved because the Planning Commission will more or less have no alternative, and we will end up being frustrated again. So I do believe in certainty, and I think if the council has its reservations, we owe it to the applicant to formalize that in some fashion so that they're not pursuing a course of action in which, it becomes a challenge. So I guess we need to be a little more definitive in where we want to go with this.
Sure. And to be fair, Vice Mayor Joseph, I didn't mean to constrain and like Bill said, the council has a range of policies that it can go and direct staff to go and bring back. So I didn't mean to say what you could or couldn't do. I just meant to say, at this point, I haven't heard clear direction to bring back, for example, a moratorium, right? So I haven't heard clear direction say, go bring back an emergency ordinance that changes the home overlay district to prohibit gas stations or any of that real sort of clear line in the sand stuff. What I've heard is a lot of concern and things, but if the council says at this point, we want to take more steadfast kind of approaches to the land use, you definitely have it in your authority, and then we would definitely need a little bit more direction so we bring back the right thing.
Okay, well, who wants to jump in first? I do think we should direct staff to do something that reflects maybe a reluctance in too many gas stations, that maybe in our failure to look at all the nuts and bolts of the plan, we allowed permitted uses that if somebody asked us point blank, we'd probably say maybe not. So maybe we do need to re-examine some of the permitted uses in the plan.
I agree. I think it is. I mean, this conversation has told us that, the nuts and bolts. I mean, we had a very global general view of how we put together the plan, but there were the pieces that unforeseen to us that we didn't examine. And I think it's timely to do that.
I think in terms of the two pending applications, if we're not going to go as far as doing a moratorium, then I think we should have those come to City Council for review and not just Planning Commission and skip the council process. And I don't know if that's allowed because it's a conditional use permit, and I know that there's guidelines for that, but.
Right, so that process would be an urgency ordinance to change the approval process for a subset of conditionally permitted uses, within the BDSP. So either way, you'd be looking at an urgency ordinance. And at this point, I don't think you have a disconnect between the City Council and the Planning Commission. I think the City Council's discussion tonight will be clearly heard by the Planning Commission. So I'm not sure you have a disconnect. What I think actually exists right now is a disconnect from what BDSP allows and the Council's comfort with what it allows. I mean, whether or not the Planning Commission is the right venue or the Council, what I hear is a disconnect about what BDSP says and now the nuts and bolts of implementation. And if
I think that's correct, Jason.
And if that's the case, a better scenario would be to say, look, we're going to do a 45-day or 90-day emergency ordinance to implement a moratorium on gas stations in American Canyon, because they're only allowed in BDSP, I think. Well, maybe out in Green Island, I don't know.
No.
Yeah, so really, and so we would bring back something that says, we're going to push a 90-day pause on everything gas station related, and sort this out. What I mean by sort this out is, is there a scenario where there is any future gas station besides Circle K that's allowed, or all the other issues that might permeate, and that staff would go back, bring some possibilities, and then within that moratorium period, we'd bring back to council.
Yes, I think that's the course of action. The conversation itself tonight has led us to re-examine this whole issue. And of course, hindsight would say, good that we had the conversation where we're thinking of it, but that was then. This is now. So I think I would agree with a 90-day window there for us to be able to examine this thing further.
Did I get the right days on the length of a duration of an urgency ordinance, Bill?
Yeah, it's 45, and I think it's 6 months and 6 months.
Okay. So the initial thing that the council would see would be 45 days, and then
correct
renewed. If that's the consensus of the council, we don't need, there's not a resolution, there's not an action that the council would take, but what we're hearing is, what we're seeing is 5 nods of the heads that that's the direction we'd like to have staff come back with.
Yeah,
And
I'm not hearing any objection to that, so.
yeah, I mean, I'm seeing 5 nods say, yes, we want to see a 45-day moratorium, emergency ordinance to impose a moratorium. And, that's the next thing that we're expecting. And then we'll launch into the work around the future gas stations in American Canyon.
Now, Jason, does that, because we should probably look at the other uses now that we've realized that this was an unintended consequence. We ought to, I mean, make sure that we have the flexibility of looking at the whole panoply of permitted uses in the various zoning areas so that we can be kind of clear on what we want to see. And also, again, maybe not part of this moratorium issue, but again, the need to start identifying an incentives plan, what we want to encourage versus what we can permit.
I'd be interested in hearing your view on incentive plan. What exactly that mean? Yeah.
Well, there will be costs. For example, drainage systems, traffic.
Exactly. Like I said, I'd be interested in hearing more about
jump in here and provide some guardrails around the topic. What's agendized tonight is a discussion on gas stations, not should we put a moratorium on every use in PDSP or the future of PDSP.
Right.
And so I'm guessing that's what Bill was going to raise his hand and kind of talk about. We do need to be mindful of what was agendized for conversation.
Exactly.
Certainly as we bring back, and we're currently checking whether we could bring back something on Feb 16 related to the urgency ordinance. But as we bring back something on an urgency ordinance, that might be the opportunity to additionally frame, what the council is interested. But for tonight, what's agendized is a discussion on a particular land use, in this case, gas stations. And
No, I get you. I understand that. And we're not trying to have a discussion about everything else, but it fits into the broader discussion of the Broadway District Specific Plan. And the guidance that we are giving you, regardless of the law, is to come up with things that prevent us from doing this for future projects or proposals. And that may include something like an incentive program or a standards program, which we talked about tonight. How high are our standards? What are the guidelines for that? And that's what we're directing staff to look at, to give us that sort of guidance. Because right now, as you can see, and I think we discussed this in previous conversations, is pat ourselves on the back for doing the Broadway district specific plan, but now we're running into the unintended consequences, and we don't want to get that off the rails. So staff come back to us with guidance that will provide council with guidance, but also the Planning Commission and others along the way as we continue to implement the BDSP.
Yeah. I think it's parallel tracks.
If I could just say one thing. I think one of the purposes of this interim ordinance is to do exactly what you're talking about now. So you don't have to, guess at this point, because that really isn't agendized, like Jason said. But you do have whatever you want to call it, 180 degrees, 360 degrees in the interim moratorium ordinance process, because the big finding is you want to pause because you want to rethink what the use designations are, as you set up some criteria right now on this topic. So that's what the urgency ordinance is about, is to figure out what those parameters might be and what you want to study and the extent of it and so forth.
Yeah, I think we can wrap up. I think staff understands that the council's expressed direction and their informal perspectives on all things BDSP, and we intend on bringing back one or more items to address those in the near future.
Thank you. Everybody good with that? Yep. I see a lot of heads nodding up now. Mine included. Okay, very good. Okay, that completes that item then. Sorry, my computer died. Well, obviously I'm back, so thank you to staff for that.
Run to council reports, Mayor.
Yeah. Management staff level reports.
Yes, we have just a couple, and I know staff will be brief. I'll start with Oscar, Brent, and actually I'll start with Brent because he's already here. We'll go with Brent, Oscar, and Creighton.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. Wanted to follow up on the speaker comment at the beginning of the meeting. The Rio Del Mar property is up for sale, so you can find it on Zillow. The property owners decided to sell it. They have gone through, and I believe they're very close, if not have already received their construction documents for grading and improvements. But the property has been put up for sale. Wanted to give you an update on a couple of milestones. We had a notice of preparation. It's one of the formal processes for the environmental impact report, for the environmental review for the Giovanoni Logistics Center today. It's kind of like a kickoff of the environmental review process. So we had that meeting today, as that's nice to get that done. There are any comments on the public comments on the scope of the environmental review? It was a 30-day review period that began last month and will end next week. So it's kind of nice getting that going on. In a similar vein, we're working very hard on the Oat Hill residential project. We're hoping to be able to release the environmental review for that on Friday. So with the goal of bringing that to the Planning Commission in March. And then after following the Planning Commission, it would go to the Airport Land Use Commission. And then following that, it'll come to the City Council. So we're working very hard to move that one along. And that's my update tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go next. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Make sure you're off on mute. I'll be brief, but I know there's a lot of community concerns over a specific homeless encampment over on American Canyon Road by Perry's Pizza, and I just wanted to communicate with you what I've communicated to several community members is, first of all, experiencing homelessness is not a crime. So we can't just go and handcuff people that are set up at a camp. We were aware, and we have been aware for some time, for probably close to 2 weeks now, of that specific one, American Canyon Road, that really caused some concern. We've actually went there several times, both day and night shift, and there's nobody there. I spoke to one of the, we just kept missing the person. I spoke to one of the night shift officers. I said, go in the middle of the night when he's sleeping, so he or she are sleeping, so we can reach out to them. Again, they're not committing a crime, but we can offer them services, try to hook them up with county services, and see what they need to move along, to not camp there. We're always coming up with an empty tent. I spoke to one of the graveyard officers. I said, does it look like it's just abandoned property? He said, no, Chief, it's really clean and tidy. Somebody is tending to it. We just keep missing them. So I can report to you today for that, specifically for that camp. We did find the occupant finally today after several attempts. He does have some temporary residency, and then he has some nights where he has homeless issues. We gave him some contact to services, and he assures us that he's going to clean it up. The other thing that residents weren't aware is we can't just go and clean up these camps. We have to post a letter, give them 72 hours to move their items. If they don't, then we do come in and clean up their camp, and then we have to store their valuables, their personal property, for up to 90 days for them to claim it. So I know there's a lot of frustrated residents that just want the police to just go in and clean up this camp. But the big reason for the delay is every time we went there was nobody there. There's nobody in the camp. So hopefully that'll be cleaned up the next 2 or 3 days. We have spoken to the occupant, and he's working on getting everything out of there. And as always, just remind everybody, if somebody is, if there's a concern of someone experiencing homelessness, they can call dispatch, they can call us. We have our connections to our county partners for homeless outreach, and we can get them in touch with Abode Homeless Services and try to help them out. Again, they have to follow, they have to agree to that. Oftentimes we find that they do refuse services and they just move to another location. But our first resort is to try to offer services. That's all.
I think likewise on that issue, Chief. There's the homeless population. There's proximity to other resources as well. Christian Health Center in Vallejo has for a long time been a resource that some agencies in American Canyon do support in terms of homelessness. So just another.
Yeah, we have a list For us, for Napa County, it's a boat, but because we do have some people experiencing homelessness from our partner city to the south, we have some of those resources as well, and addresses and phone numbers for them, because sometimes they want to go back to their home county. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'll turn it over to Creighton. Thank you, Chief.
And I'll be brief here. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, new month, new theme for us programmatically. So you can check out our February webpage with all kinds of great resources on it. This is We Heart Everyone in AC month. So we're running that through our theme. We have some resources on the website for Lunar New Year and some information about Black History Month, as well as some of the history behind Valentine's Day. We are having what we're calling a We Heart Everyone drive-through on February 12th in our Aquatics parking lot from 4 to 6. So please stop by yourselves. Tell the residents coming out. We'll be having more information from our communications folks putting it out to the community. We also have a great teen-oriented program this month, a little bit different we're trying, called Teens Tell, giving our youth an opportunity to share their feelings and experience through this pandemic through art and writing. So we're trying something a little bit different. We've reached out to the counselors at the middle school and high school, and hopefully, I think we'll get some great pieces that come out of it. And lastly, you couldn't help but miss what Ms. Selleck had mentioned at the very beginning of this meeting. The foundation, as well as some of our staff, is doing Heart Your Parks. There's all kinds of great stuff on specifically the foundation, acparks.org website, with some neat opportunities for kids and parents to go through our parks and explore and find cool stuff. So I'll leave it at that for tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you. Put that drive-through on my calendar. Thank you.
Just one other quick item for myself, Mayor. We are asking everyone to save the date for February 23rd. We are going to be doing a State of the City virtual presentation this year. It's going to be a Zoom format. The time is still a little bit to be determined about when in the evening. It'll be in the evening, but exactly when. It's a fourth Tuesday for us, so it's an off-council meeting night. We are going to be having a special guest appearance from Dr. Relucio, the county's health officer, to come and give us just kind of a little review of where, how last year went and what we are looking at going forward in 2021. And then we'll be also giving the city perspectives to our residents. So you'll start to see some communications on that. We want to make sure that's in your calendar.
Can you say the date again? I missed the date.
February 23rd.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further from the city, Ms. Holly?
No, Mayor, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, move on to council reports and comments. We did get a copy of Councilmember Oro's report. Anything further to add to that?
No, just looks like the Sites Water Project is moving forward, and cross our fingers, we'll have a secure water supply in a few years.
All right. Good show. Councilmember Washington. Anything to report?
No comment. No comments. Thanks.
I know you were busy with League of California Cities.
Yeah, I was. They're heavy busy. They did.
Enough information to blow your head up. All right. Well, good you attended. That's always a good. I always recommend those. Councilmember Albanamos.
In the interest of getting into my PJs as quickly as possible, I have nothing to report.
Good thing about working from home. Yes. Vice Mayor Joseph.
Just a couple of things. One, we attended the NVTA meeting, and there was a lot of issues, but one of note for American Canyon is an affordable housing project got a bus shelter grant. So apparently we're going to be getting maybe 2 or 4 new bus shelters in American Canyon thanks to an affordable housing project in Napa. And then the other one is Councilmember Washington and I did attend the 2x2 with the school district. Very interesting. It was our first session. We did some updates on COVID and reopening and that thing, but the primary focus was basically how to dispose of the properties that the school district owns in our jurisdiction. And the general concept is the school district would love us to facilitate rezoning and helping them sell that property so that they can put some money back into their operations. I think we expressed some interest, but wanted to make sure it could be earmarked for our school facilities, Donaldson Elementary in particular. So we did talk about trying to put together some kind of an overall agreement that would identify what we can do to facilitate those parcels on the one hand, how we might want to reuse some of those parcels, the old Napa Junction, and areas in which we can work together in a partnership. Harking back, frankly, to 20 plus years ago when we built the middle school, the first one, it was a partnership between the city and the school district. And I think we got some kind of an award from what I can recall. And it's that same principle. We represent the same customer. So we ought to be looking out for what they need, whether it's a school side or a city side. So for me, a potentially positive meeting. We'll see what happens next.
Okay, for myself, well, also in the interest of time, had a great event, the American Canyon High School Academic Decathlon. That's the speech contest. So was there for interviews with Head 9 students moving forward. Generally they do quite well. I think they just had their contest this week. We'll hear the results on it. Wish them all good luck. They're fine young people in our community, and they certainly represent us very well. That being said, any future agenda items? Okay, well, it's time to get in the jammies, so I'll say we have completed our evening, our work for the evening. We are adjourned.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Good night, Jerry.
Good night.